After 35 years as a high court judge, sending the worst criminals to prison, I thought I had seen the absolute bottom of human nature. I was wrong. The darkest evil was not in the courtroom, it was standing right in my dining room, holding a glass of Merlot. At my own retirement dinner, I watched my ambitious nephew slip a white pill into my wine glass. I did not scream. I did not call security. I simply pretended to drop my fork. In the 5 seconds it took him to look down, I swapped the goblets. And when he stood up to propose a toast to my eternal rest, he had no idea he was holding his own execution in his hand. My name is Jeremiah Cross. I am 69 years old, and tonight I am going to tell you how I turned a murder attempt into a masterclass in justice. If you are watching this, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. I want to know how far the truth travels. The crystal chandelier above the dining table was worth $15,000, but it could not outshine the sweat glistening on my nephew Terrence's forehead. There were 200 guests in my home tonight. Senators, lawyers, old friends from the precinct, and my entire ungrateful family. They were all here to celebrate the end of my career as a Supreme Court judge. But I knew for at least 3 people in this room, this was not a retirement party. It was a funeral reception that was starting a few hours too early. I sat at the head of the mahogany table. My hands were folded calmly, but my heart was hammering a rhythm of pure rage against my ribs. I was not looking at the guests. I was looking at the massive, gilded mirror on the wall opposite me. It was an antique from the 19th century, and it offered a perfect view of the person standing directly behind my right shoulder, Terrence. He was 30 years old, handsome in a way that hid his rot, and wearing a tuxedo I knew for a fact I had paid for. He was hovering over my wine glass. I saw his hand move. It was a quick, practiced motion like a magician doing a coin trick. A small white pill dropped from his sleeve and fizzed silently into my 1990 Cabernet Sauvignon. He gave the glass a tiny swirl to dissolve the evidence, and stepped back, his face composing itself into a mask of loving devotion. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This boy, I had paid for his private school. I had paid off his first 3 gambling debts. I had kept his record clean when he got caught with stolen goods at 19. And this was his repayment, a pill in my drink. I could have stood up right then. I could have pointed a finger and shouted to the police commissioner who was sitting 3 tables away. But 35 years on the bench teaches you patience. It teaches you that an accusation is nothing without a verdict, and a verdict requires evidence. If I accused him now, he would claim it was an aspirin or a sweetener. He would call me a senile old man having a paranoid episode. No, I needed something absolute. Uncle Jeremiah. Terrence said, his voice booming to silence the room. Can I have everyone attention, please? The room went quiet. 200 faces turned toward us. I saw my son Trey sitting to my left. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped as usual. Next to him sat his wife, Emily. She was watching me with the intensity of a hawk. Her blue eyes were cold, calculating, and fixed on my wine glass. She gave Terrence a microscopic nod. They were in this together. It is time for the toast, Terrence announced, reaching for his own glass of wine, which was sitting right next to mine on the white tablecloth. This was the moment. Oh, clumsy me, I muttered. I let my heavy silver fork slip from my fingers. It clattered loudly against the china plate and bounced onto the floor under the table. Oops, let me get that, I said. Terrence instinctively bent down to retrieve it. Let me help you, Uncle. He disappeared beneath the tablecloth. I had 5 seconds, maybe 4. My hand moved with a speed that defied my 69 years. I grabbed my poison glass and slid it to his position. I took his clean glass and slid it to mine. They were identical crystal goblets filled to the exact same level. When Terrence popped his head back up, holding the fork with a fake smile, the switch was already done. Here you go, Uncle Jeremiah, he said, placing the fork down. He did not even look at the table. His arrogance was his blind spot. He was so focused on the performance, so focused on the money he thought he was about to inherit, that he did not check the details. Thank you, son, I said, my voice steady. Terrence picked up the glass. My glass. The glass he had just spiked. He raised it high. The stage lighting caught the deep red liquid, making it look like blood. To Jeremiah Cross. He began, his voice trembling with emotion that everyone thought was love, but I knew was adrenaline. a man who has defined justice in this state for 3 decades. I sat back in my chair, my hands resting on the armrests, watching him. I watched Emily across the table. She was licking her lips slightly, her eyes darting between me and the glass in Terrence's hand. She was waiting for me to drink. She wanted to see the light go out of my eyes. "You have been a father to me," Terrence continued. "You took me in when no one else would. You taught me that the law is absolute. And now, as you step down into a well-deserved rest, I want you to know that your legacy is safe with us. We will take care of everything you built." The audacity was breathtaking. He was asking for my blessing to steal my life, while holding the weapon he intended to use. "To a long and peaceful retirement," Terrence finished. "To Uncle Jeremiah. To family," I replied. I lifted the clean glass to my lips. Terrence lifted the poisoned glass to his. I watched the liquid touch his lips. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. Once. Twice. He drained half the glass. He wanted to show his enthusiasm. He wanted to make sure I drank mine, so he drank his to encourage me. I took a small sip of the clean wine. It tasted like victory. Terrence set his glass down. He smiled at me, a wide, toothy grin. For a moment, nothing happened. The room erupted in applause. People were cheering. My son Trey was clapping politely. Emily was staring at me, waiting for me to grab my chest. 1 minute passed. Terrence was shaking hands with the mayor. He looked vibrant, healthy. 2 minutes passed. I saw him loosen his tie. He pulled at the collar of his shirt. A sheen of sweat appeared on his upper lip. He frowned slightly, shaking his head as if to clear a sudden fog. 3 minutes. Terrence stumbled. He reached out to grab the back of my chair for support. His grip was incredibly strong, digging into the leather. "Uncle," he wheezed. His voice sounded wet, like his lungs were filling with water. "Are you all right, son?" I asked, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You look a bit pale." I cannot," he gasped. He brought his hands to his throat. His eyes were bulging wide with terror. He looked at me, and then he looked at the glass in front of him. Then he looked at the glass in front of me. The realization hit him. I saw the moment his brain connected the dots. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, mixed with the panic of a dying animal. "You," he choked out. "You." He fell. It was not a graceful faint. He collapsed like a building coming down. He smashed onto the table, shattering plates and sending crystal flying. He rolled onto the floor, his body convulsing violently. Foam began to bubble at the corners of his mouth. Screams erupted in the ballroom. The music cut off. "Terrence!" Emily shrieked. She jumped up from her chair, knocking it over. She did not run to help him immediately. Instead, she pointed a finger directly at me. Her face was twisted, not with concern, but with accusation. "He did it," she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing, cutting through the chaos. "He switched the glasses. I saw him. He poisoned him." The room froze. 200 pairs of eyes turned from the convulsion man on the floor to me. I sat still. I did not stand up. I did not defend myself. I just looked at Emily. "You saw me switch the glasses, Emily?" I asked, my voice projecting clearly in the sudden silence. "If you saw me switch them, then you must have known one of them was poisoned. Why did you let him drink it?" Her face went pale. She realized her mistake. She had just admitted she knew about the poison, but she recovered fast, too fast. "He is trying to kill us all," she yelled, turning to the crowd. "He is crazy. He has been talking about people stealing from him for weeks. He is paranoid and dangerous. Call the police." I realized then that the police were already here. Not just the guests. Uniformed officers were bursting through the front doors. They were here too quickly. They had been called before Terrence even collapsed. This was part of the plan. I was supposed to die, and they were going to frame it as a stroke or a heart attack. But they had the police ready, just in case I made a scene. Now they were repurposing the police to arrest me for attempted murder. Officers rushed toward the head table. Paramedics who had been stationed outside for the event came running in. They pushed me aside to get to Terrence. "Sir, stand up and put your hands behind your back." A young officer barked at me, pulling me from my chair. I did not resist. I knew the law better than he did. I knew that resisting now would only give them ammunition. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my tuxedo jacket. I looked down at Terrence. He was still conscious but paralyzed, unable to breathe, unable to speak. The succinylcholine was doing its work, paralyzing his muscles while leaving his mind awake to feel every second of the terror. It was a cruel poison, a coward poison. "Dad, please tell them it is a mistake." My son Trey stammered, standing uselessly by the table. "It is no mistake, Trey," Emily snapped. "Look at him. Look at your father's face. He is enjoying this." She was right. I was. The officer spun me around and I felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto my wrists. The sound echoed in the silent ballroom. Flashbulbs went off as the press photographers I had invited captured the image. The Honorable Jeremiah Cross, retiring judge, arrested for poisoning his own nephew at his own party. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited. "I intend to," I said calmly. As they led me away, I locked eyes with Emily one last time. She was holding Terrence's head, but she was looking at me with a smirk that promised war. She thought she had won. She thought that with me in handcuffs and Terrence as the victim, she could spin this narrative however she wanted. She thought she could take my house, my money, and my dignity while I rotted in a cell. But she forgot who she was dealing with. I had not just swapped a drink, I had started a game. And as they marched me out past the horrified faces of my colleagues and friends, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground, and I was going to do it from behind bars. This was just the opening statement. The interrogation room was a concrete box designed to strip a man of his dignity. The air was frigid, pumped in through a vent that rattled incessantly. A single steel table was bolted to the floor. I sat on the metal chair, my handcuffs biting into my wrists. I had sent thousands of men to rooms exactly like this one. I knew the psychology of the space. It was meant to make you feel small. It was meant to make you desperate for a friend. But I did not need a friend. I needed a lawyer. And until Rachel Katz arrived, I was going to be a stone wall. The heavy metal door swung open. A detective walked in carrying a plastic evidence bag. He was young, probably mid-30s, with the arrogant stride of a man who thinks he has already solved the puzzle. I recognized him. Detective Miller. I had signed search warrants for him in the past. He was competent, but unimaginative. "Judge Cross," Miller said, sitting across from me. "You know how this works. We can do this the hard way, or you can save us both some time." I stared at him. I kept my face blank. Miller sighed and tossed the evidence bag onto the table. It slid across the metal surface and stopped inches from my hands. Inside was a small amber prescription bottle. It was unlabeled. "We found this in your tuxedo jacket pocket," Miller said, his voice flat. "We ran a quick field test. It is pure succinylcholine, a paralytic agent, the same substance found in your nephew's blood." I looked at the bottle. I did not touch it. I did not flinch. My mind raced back to the start of the evening. When Terrence arrived, he had embraced me. It was a big, showy hug for the cameras. He had clapped me on the shoulder and patted my chest. I remember thinking it was excessive. I remember feeling the weight of his hand. He had slipped the bottle into my pocket right then. He had planted the murder weapon on me before he even poured the poison. It was a clumsy move, a desperate move. "Do you have a prescription for a neuromuscular blocker, Judge?" Miller asked, leaning forward. "Or do you just carry lethal injection drugs to retirement parties?" I remained silent. I knew that if I spoke, I would say something incriminating. I would say that Terrence was a fool. I would say that planting evidence was the oldest trick in the book. But I had to wait. Miller leaned back, frustrated by my silence. "We have witnesses who saw you switch the glasses. We have the victim in critical condition. We have the weapon in your pocket. This is attempted murder in the first degree. Your career is over. Your legacy is ash. Talk to me, Jeremiah. Tell me why you did it. Was it the money? Did he ask for a loan you did not want to give? He was fishing. He had the pieces, but he did not have the picture." I closed my eyes and let the darkness of the room sharpen my memory. Succinylcholine. It was not a common street drug. You could not buy it on a corner. It was a medical-grade paralytic used for intubation in hospitals. It required refrigeration. It required access. And then I remembered. The year was 1998, the state versus Whitaker. It was one of the most technical cases I ever presided over. A nurse had killed her husband using this exact drug. She thought she would get away with it because succinylcholine breaks down quickly in the body, leaving almost no trace. But she made a mistake. She stole it from her own hospital inventory. I remembered the expert testimony vividly. I remembered the details of how the drug worked. It binds to the receptors in the muscles, causing them to fire uncontrollably for seconds before locking them down. It paralyzes the diaphragm. The victim cannot breathe, but they are fully conscious. They suffocate while wide awake. Terrence did not have medical access. Emily did not work in a hospital. But Terrence had a gambling problem. He hung around circles where people traded in stolen goods. If he had this drug, it meant he had bought it on the black market. And black market medical supplies in this city came from one specific source, a warehouse district controlled by the Russo syndicate. I had signed a RICO indictment against them 5 years ago. If Terrence was buying from the Russos, he was not just in debt, he was owned. This was not just a family squabble. This was a desperate man trying to pay off a blood debt with my life insurance policy. The door opened again, interrupting my train of thought. Miller looked up, annoyed. "What is it?" he snapped. A uniformed officer stepped in. "His son is here. He says he has legal documents for the prisoner." Miller looked at me, then back at the officer. "Let him in. Maybe he can talk some sense into the judge." Trey walked in. My son looked like a ghost. His skin was gray, his eyes red-rimmed and puffy. He was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt and slacks that looked like he had pulled them out of a hamper. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at the walls, at the detective, anywhere but at his father. "Trey," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. He flinched. He sat in the chair Miller vacated. The detective stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "Dad," Trey whispered, "this is a mess. It is a nightmare. Emily is falling apart. She is at the hospital with Terrence. She says he might have permanent brain damage." "Good," I thought. "Why are you here, Trey?" I asked. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded document. His hands were shaking. This was not a limited power of attorney for legal representation. This was a general power of attorney, granting full, unrestricted access to all my assets, real estate, banking, and investments. It gave Emily the power to sell my house, to empty my retirement funds, to change my beneficiary designations. And then I saw it, at the bottom of the page. My signature was already there. It was a good forgery, a very good one. It had the same sharp loop on the J and the hard slash on the cross of the T. But it was missing the small dot I always put at the end of my name, a habit I picked up in law school to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. "You want me to ratify this?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Trey wiped sweat from his forehead. "It is already signed, Dad," Emily said. "You signed it last week, before the party. She said you knew your memory was getting bad, so you wanted her to handle things. We just need you to acknowledge it in front of the detective, so it is valid for the bail hearing." The audacity was staggering. They had forged my signature in advance. They planned to use this document whether I was dead or in jail. If I was dead, it would give them control of the estate before probate. If I was in jail, they would use it to strip me clean while I was locked up. Emily said I signed this. I asked, looking at my son. "Yes," Trey said, his voice thin. "She said you forgot." I picked up the paper. The paper felt heavy like a death sentence. Not my death. Theirs. "Trey," I said, "look at me." He slowly lifted his eyes. I saw fear there, but not fear for me. Fear of her. Fear of Emily. He was a broken man, a puppet dancing on her strings. "Do you believe I tried to kill Terrence?" I asked. Trey swallowed hard. "Emily says she saw you switch the glasses. She says you have been acting strange lately. Paranoid, aggressive. She says maybe the dementia is setting in early." Dementia. So that was the narrative. The old judge lost his mind. He became violent. He tried to kill his nephew in a fit of senile rage. It was perfect. It discredited my testimony. It invalidated my will. It put me in a facility and put them in my mansion. I looked at the detective in the corner. Miller was watching closely. "Detective," I said clear and loud, "I want you to witness this." I took the document in both hands. "Dad, what are you doing?" Trey cried out, half rising from his chair. I ripped the paper down the middle. The sound of tearing paper was sharp and violent in the quiet room. I ripped it again and again. I turned the legal instrument that would have enslaved me into confetti. "That is my signature, but I did not put it there," I said, dropping the pieces onto the metal table. "This is a forgery, and by presenting it to me in a police station, your wife has just committed a felony. And you, Trey, By bringing it here, you are an accessory to fraud." Trey's face turned a sickly shade of white. He stared at the pile of torn paper. "You are making a mistake, Dad," he hissed, and suddenly the weakness was gone, replaced by a flash of desperate anger. "Stop being so stubborn. Emily warned me you would do this. She said you are too proud to admit you are sick." "I am not sick, Trey. I am the sanest man in this room." "No, you are not," Trey shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You just poisoned a family member. You are confused. You are lashing out. Emily is trying to help you. She is the only one trying to help you. Everyone else thinks you are a monster." He stood up, breathing hard. "Just sign the papers, Dad. When I come back with the next copy, just sign it. If you do not, Emily is going to have you declared incompetent. She has doctors, Dad. She has records. She will put you in a hole so deep you will never see the sun again." There it was, the threat. The mask had slipped completely. "Get out," I said. Trey looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a man who needed money more than he needed a father. He turned and banged on the door. The officer opened it and let him out. Detective Miller walked over to the table. He looked at the torn paper. He looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't sympathy, it was curiosity. "That was an interesting performance, Judge," Miller said. "It was not a performance, Detective," I said, leaning back in the cold metal chair. "It was evidence. You might want to bag that confetti. It is going to be Exhibit A in my countersuit." Miller chuckled darkly. "You are a tough old bird, Jeremiah, but you are still in a cell, and your family is out there building a case that says you belong in a padded room." "Let them build," I said, closing my eyes. I was done talking. I had the weapon I needed. I knew about the succinylcholine. I knew about the forgery. And I knew that my son was no longer my son. He was an enemy combatant. Now I just needed Rachel Katz to walk through that door and get me out of here. Because the real war was not happening in this police station. It was happening in my house, where Emily was currently trying to figure out how to break into my safe. She was in for a surprise. Rachel Katz walked into the precinct like a storm front, wearing a tailored white suit that cost more than the detective annual salary. She did not ask for permission, she demanded results. Within 45 minutes, the paperwork was signed, the bail was posted, and I was walking out into the cool night air. The fresh oxygen tasted sweet, but it was tainted by the knowledge that my life had been incinerated in less than 4 hours. "You need to stay at a hotel tonight, Jeremiah," Rachel said as we walked to her car. Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement. "The press is already camping out at your gate. If you go home, it will be a circus." "I am not going to a hotel, Rachel," I said, opening the passenger door. "I am going to my house. I built that house. I paid for every brick. I am not going to let a forgery and a bottle of poison chase me out of my own castle." Rachel sighed, starting the engine. She knew better than to argue with me when I used that tone. It was the same tone I used when I overruled an objection in my courtroom. Final. Absolute. We drove in silence. My mind was a chessboard, moving pieces analyzing threats. Terrence was alive, which meant the murder charge would be downgraded to attempted murder or assault. That was manageable. The forgery was clumsy. That was beatable. But the public perception, the stain on my name, that was the real damage. When we pulled up to the wrought iron gates of my estate, the press was indeed there. A dozen cameras flashed blindingly as we drove through. I stared straight ahead, refusing to flinch. They wanted a picture of a broken man. I gave them a picture of stone. Rachel drove up the winding driveway and stopped in front of the main entrance. The porch lights were blazing. My house looked like a beacon of warmth and safety. It was a lie. I thanked Rachel and stepped out. I walked up the stone steps, reaching into my pocket for my keys. I selected the brass key for the front door, the one I had carried for 20 years. I slid it into the lock. It did not turn. I frowned. I jiggled it, thinking maybe the tumblers were stuck. It stopped halfway. I pulled it out and looked at the lock. The brass finish was shiny. Too shiny. It was new. They had changed the locks. In the 4 hours I was in custody, they had called a locksmith and changed the locks on my own home. I pounded on the heavy oak door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet night. "Open the door!" I shouted. "This is my house." The door did not open. Instead, the intercom speaker crackled to life. "Go away, Jeremiah." It was Emily's voice. It was distorted by the speaker, but I could hear the smugness dripping from every syllable. "You are not welcome here. Open this door, Emily, or I will kick it down." "I would not advise that," she replied. The door clicked and opened a few inches. The security chain was still engaged. Emily's face appeared in the gap. She was not smiling. She was wearing a mask of terrified victimhood, but her eyes were cold and dead. She held up a piece of paper against the crack in the door. "Read it, Jeremiah," she said. "It is a temporary restraining order, granted by Judge Miller an hour ago. You are a danger to the inhabitants of this house. You are a danger to Terrence, who is currently recovering in the guest bedroom. If you come within 100 feet of this property, you will be arrested for violating a court order." I stared at the paper. An ex parte order, granted without a hearing based solely on the petitioner affidavit. She must have told Judge Miller I was a homicidal maniac. Miller always was a fool for a sobbing woman. "You cannot do this," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "This is my property. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore," she whispered, leaning closer to the gap. "The power of attorney you signed, remember. We used it to file a quick claim deed this afternoon. Technically, this house belongs to the Cross Family Trust now, and as the trustee, I am evicting you." She laughed. It was a soft, cruel sound. "Oh, and I packed a bag for you. I did not want you to freeze." She unhooked the chain for a second, shoved a suitcase through the gap, and slammed the door shut. The deadbolt clicked home with a finality that felt like a coffin lid closing. I looked down. It was my old travel suitcase, the one with the broken wheel. It was bulging at the seams. She had not packed it, she had stuffed it. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The zipper burst open. My clothes spilled out onto the driveway. My judicial robes, my suits, my underwear. All of it wrinkled, wadded up and thrown into the dirt like garbage. On top of the pile lay a single framed photograph. It was a picture of me and Trey fishing when he was 10 years old. The glass was shattered. I stood there staring at the ruin of my personal effects. The rage that filled me was so hot, it felt like my blood was boiling. I wanted to scream. I wanted to find a brick and smash every window in the mansion. But then I heard a sound behind me. A shutter click. I turned around. The driveway was not empty. The neighbors were there. The properties in this gated community were large, but the sightlines were clear. My shouting had drawn attention. At the end of the driveway, Mrs. Gable was standing by her hedge, holding her phone up, recording. Mr. Henderson was on his balcony watching through binoculars. And then the front door opened again. Emily stepped out onto the porch. She was not alone. She had dragged Trey out with her. She was wearing a torn blouse and her hair was disheveled. She looked like she had been attacked. "Please, Dad, just go," she screamed, her voice pitching up into a theatrical wail. "We do not have any money for you. Please do not hurt us again. We just want to be safe." She was putting on a show, a performance for the neighbors, a performance for the cameras that might be zooming in from the street. Trey stood next to her looking at his shoes. He was complicit in his silence. He was letting his wife frame his father as a violent abuser. "You monster," Mrs. Gable shouted from the hedge. "Leave them alone. I have called the police, Jeremiah. They are on their way." I looked at Mrs. Gable. I had helped her with her zoning permits 5 years ago. I had attended her daughter's wedding. Now she looked at me with pure revulsion. "Go away, you crazy old man." Another voice shouted from the shadows. The chorus of judgment began. The wealthy elite of this community, people who shook my hand at the club, were now booing me from their manicured lawns. They believed the lie, because the lie was more exciting than the truth. They saw a young woman crying and an old man shouting, and they made their verdict. I was being convicted in the court of public opinion before I even stepped foot in a real courtroom. I looked back at Emily. She was burying her face in Trey's shoulder, pretending to sob, but I saw her peek out to check if the audience was captivated. She had turned my sanctuary into a stage, and I was the villain. I could not fight this here. If the police arrived and found me shouting on the lawn in violation of a restraining order, I would be back in a cell until trial. I would lose my freedom, and with it, my ability to fight back. I had to retreat. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, to turn my back on my home, on my son, and on the woman who was stealing my life. I bent down and gathered my clothes. I shoved them back into the broken suitcase as best I could. I picked up the shattered photo of me and Trey. I brushed the glass off his face. I put the photo in my pocket. I stood up straight. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at Emily one last time. I did not shout. I did not threaten. I just nodded. "Enjoy the house, Emily," I said quietly. "Enjoy it while you can." I turned and walked down the driveway. The suitcase dragged on the pavement, its broken wheels scraping a harsh rhythm against the concrete. The neighbors fell silent as I passed, watching me with a mixture of fear and disgust. I walked past the press at the gate, ignoring their questions. I walked until I was out of sight of the house, out of sight of the life I used to have. I hailed a taxi on the main road. The driver looked at my disheveled appearance and the bursting suitcase with suspicion, but he took my cash. "Take me to the Starlight Motel," I said. The Starlight was a flea bag establishment on the edge of town, the kind of place where people rented rooms by the hour, and no one asked for ID. It was the last place anyone would look for a retired Supreme Court judge. I checked into room 12. The carpet smelled of stale beer and old cigarettes. The wallpaper was peeling. The neon sign outside buzzed with a headache-inducing flicker. I sat on the sagging bed. I was 69 years old. I was homeless. My assets were frozen or stolen. My reputation was in tatters. My family was celebrating my demise in my own dining room. Most men would have broken. Most men would have wept. I reached into the lining of my suitcase. I pulled out a small black burner phone I had purchased 6 months ago with cash. It was a precaution I had hoped never to use. I dialed Rachel's number. She answered on the first ring. "Where are you, Jeremiah?" she asked. "I heard you went back to the house. The police scanner says there was a disturbance." "I am safe," I said. "I am at the Starlight." "The Starlight? Jeremiah, that place is a dump. Let me get you a suite at the Ritz." "Number 1, I said. "No paper trails, no credit cards. I need to be invisible for the next 48 hours. There was a pause. "What are you planning, Jeremiah?" "I am planning a counterstrike, Rachel. But first I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "I need you to open the safe deposit box at First National, the one under the name J.C. Doe. You have the key in your office safe." "I remember," Rachel said. "What is in it?" "Laptop," I said. "And a hard drive. Bring them to me. Tonight." "Jeremiah." Rachel's voice dropped an octave. "What is on that hard drive?" "Insurance," I said. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the grimy blinds at the parking lot. I was alone, but I was not unarmed. Emily thought she was smart. She thought she had covered every angle. She had the power of attorney. She had the restraining order. She had the forgery. She had checked the house for cameras I knew she had. She had swept for bugs. She had disabled the main security system. But Emily was looking for a security system designed to keep intruders out. She did not know about the system designed to watch the people inside. 1 year ago, I started noticing small things. Money missing from my wallet, documents moved on my desk, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I was a judge. My instinct for deception was honed over decades. I knew something was rotting in my house. So I hired a specialist, an ex-CIA tech who owed me a favor. We installed the Omega system. It was not connected to the Wi-Fi. It did not have a control panel on the wall. The cameras were pinholes, hidden in the smoke detectors in the molding of the ceiling, in the eyes of the portraits hanging in the hallway. The microphones were embedded in the light switches. They ran on independent battery power. They recorded to a secure cloud server that only I could access. For 12 months I had been recording every conversation, every plot, every moment of their betrayal. I had hours of footage. I had audio of Emily instructing Trey on how to forge my signature. I had video of Terrence buying drugs from the Russo syndicate in my garage. I had been waiting for them to make a move. I needed them to commit a crime that was undeniable. I needed them to cross the line from ungrateful to criminal. Tonight they had crossed it. When Rachel arrived with the laptop, I would not just defend myself. I was going to go on the offensive. I was going to turn my exile into their prison. I sat back on the bed and waited for the neon light to flash again. Protocol Omega was active, and the show was just beginning. The glow of the cheap television was the only light in room 12 of the Starlight Motel. I sat on the edge of the mattress, watching my life disintegrate in high definition. The local news channel had preempted their weather report to broadcast a live stream that was currently trending #1 in the state. It was Terrence. He was lying in a hospital bed, wearing a neck brace that was medically unnecessary, given the nature of the poison, but theatrically perfect. His skin was pale, likely aided by makeup, and his eyes were glistening with practiced tears. He held his phone with a trembling hand, filming himself in selfie mode. "Hey everyone," Terrence whispered, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to say thank you for the prayers. I almost didn't make it. The doctor said if I had taken one more sip, my heart would have stopped instantly." He paused to wipe a fake tear. The comment section on the screen scrolled by so fast, it was a blur of anger. "Justice for Terrence. Lock the old man up. The killer judge. It is hard to believe." Terrence continued looking directly into the camera lens. "The man I looked up to. The man I called uncle. He tried to end me because he was jealous. He was jealous that I was starting my own law firm. He was jealous that the community loved me. He could not stand sharing the spotlight, so he tried to put me in a grave." I watched in silence. The audacity was impressive. Terrence had never passed the bar exam. He had failed twice. His law firm existed only on business cards I had paid to print. But the public did not know that. To them, he was a young, handsome victim, and I was the bitter old tyrant. I picked up my burner phone and dialed my bank. I needed to check my liquidity. The automated voice on the other end was cold and final. "Access denied. Your accounts have been frozen by court order number 7729. Please contact the fraud department." Emily moved fast. She had used the forged power of attorney and the restraining order to lock me out of my own fortune. My pension, my savings, my investment portfolio, everything was behind a wall of ice. I had built a net worth of over $5 million over 40 years, and right now, I could not even buy a sandwich. Or so they thought. I stood up and walked to the closet, where I had hung my tattered suit jacket. It was a vintage piece, tailored in the 90s. My father had taught me that a man always keeps a reserve, a real reserve, not in a bank, not in a safe, but on his person. I took a small pocket knife from my keychain and sliced open the silk lining of the jacket. Inside, stitched between the fabric and the canvas stiffener, were rows of crisp $100 bills, $10,000 in cash. I had carried this jacket to every major event for 2 decades. It was my emergency fund, my escape hatch. I pulled the money out. It smelled of old fabric and security. I was not broke. I was underground. I changed into a pair of dark jeans and a black hoodie I had bought from a thrift store down the street. I pulled the hood up over my gray hair. I looked in the mirror. The Honorable Judge Cross was gone. In his place was a shadow. I left the motel through the back exit, avoiding the cameras. I walked 3 blocks to a rental car agency that accepted cash deposits. I rented a gray sedan, indistinguishable from 1,000 others on the road. I had one stop to make before I went to Terrence's house. I drove to a small office above a pawn shop in the industrial district. The sign on the door read, "Roland Investigations." Roland was a former vice cop I had kept out of prison 10 years ago when he got framed by a dirty lieutenant. He owed me. I walked in and threw $2,000 on his desk. "I need eyes on my house, Roland," I said. "I need to know who comes and goes, and I need a signal jammer." Roland looked at the money, then at me. He did not ask questions. He opened a drawer and handed me a black device the size of a deck of cards. "Range is 50 feet, he said. "It kills Wi-Fi, cellular, and security signals." "Thank you," I said. I drove to Terrence's house. He lived in a modern condo on the north side of town, a place I had helped him down payment on. I knew the layout. I knew the security code because he was too lazy to change the factory default I had set up for him. 1, 2, 3, 4. I parked the sedan a block away. It was 2 in the morning. The street was quiet. Terrence was in the hospital. Emily was likely at my mansion trying to break into my safe. The condo should be empty. I walked up the driveway, keeping to the shadows. I pressed the button on the jammer. The red light on the security camera above the garage door blinked out. I punched the code into the keypad. The garage door rumbled open. I slipped inside and hit the button to close it behind me. The garage was a shrine to Terrence's ego. His BMW, which I made the lease payments on, was parked in the center. The walls were lined with expensive tools that had never been used. But I was not here for his toys. I was here for his secrets. I knew my nephew. He was messy. He was arrogant. He never threw anything away because he thought he was untouchable. I started with the workbench. Drawers full of unpaid parking tickets and empty vape cartridges. Nothing useful. I moved to the filing cabinet in the corner. It was locked. I used a crowbar from his own wall to pry it open. Inside were tax returns he had never filed, and letters from the Bar Association rejecting his application. Embarrassing, but not criminal. I needed to find the source. Succinylcholine did not just appear, and the desperation he showed at the party came from somewhere. A man does not kill his golden goose unless a wolf is at the door. I looked around the garage. My eyes landed on a large metal tool chest in the back corner. It was covered in dust except for the handle. The handle was clean. I walked over and tried to open the top lid. Locked. I used the crowbar again. The metal screeched and gave way. Inside there were no tools. Instead there was a black duffel bag. I unzipped it. My breath caught in my throat. The bag was filled with cash, but it was not organized. It was thrown in haphazardly, like it had been collected in a panic. 5s, 10s, 20s, crumpled bills. I did a quick visual estimate, maybe $15,000. Not enough to be rich, but enough to be running. Under the cash was a leather ledger. I opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes. Names, dates, amounts. It was a gambling ledger. I flipped through the pages. The numbers were staggering. 10,000 on the Knicks, 20,000 on a boxing match, 50,000 on a horse race in Dubai. The loss column was a sea of red ink. I turned to the last page. The date was from 3 days ago. The entry was written in a different hand. Heavy, jagged strokes that tore through the paper. The name written at the top was Russo. My stomach turned. The Russo crime family. They ran the underground casinos and the loan sharking operations in the city. They were vicious. They did not sue you when you did not pay. They sent men with hammers. I looked at the final figure at the bottom of the page. It was circled 3 times in red ink. $3 million. Below the number was a date, next Friday. And below the date was a note written in that same heavy, jagged hand. Payment in full, or we take fingers. Then we take limbs. I stared at the page. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a gavel strike. Terrence was not just ambitious. He was a dead man walking. He had gambled away everything he had and everything he borrowed. He was $3 million in the hole to the most violent syndicate in the state, and the deadline was less than a week away. That was why he needed me dead. My life insurance policy. I had a policy worth $5 million. It was a legacy plan intended to set up a charitable foundation after I passed. But Terrence knew about it, and he knew that as my primary beneficiary, if I died of natural causes or an accident, the payout would be immediate. He did not want my house. He did not want my judicial seat. He needed liquid cash to stop the Russos from dismembering him. He had tried to kill me not out of hatred, but out of sheer, terrifying necessity. I was just a walking check to him, a way to clear his balance sheet. I took my phone out and snapped photos of every page in the ledger. I photographed the bag of cash. I photographed the note threatening his fingers. Then I saw something else. Tucked into the back pocket of the ledger was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a printout of an email chain. From Terrence Cross to Emily Cross. Subject, Plan B. I read the text. If the old man does not drink the wine, we go to the backup. I have the pillow ready. You just need to make sure the cameras are off. We cannot miss the deadline. The Russos are watching the house. I felt a cold fury settle over me. It was absolute. It was clarifying. Emily was not just an accomplice. She was a co-conspirator. They had discussed smothering me with a pillow if the poison failed. They were animals. I put the papers back in the ledger and shoved the ledger into my hoodie pocket. I had the motive. I had the connection to the poison source. I had the proof of conspiracy. I was about to leave when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I froze. The jammer was still on, so the garage door would not open for them. But they would be coming to the side door. I heard car doors slam. Voices. It was not Terrence, obviously. He was in the hospital. It was Emily. And a man voice I did not recognize. Why is the opener not working? Emily's voice came through the thin side door. It was muffled but distinct. Probably the storm knocked out the receiver. A deep, gravelly voice replied, "Just use the key." I looked around. There was no back exit to the garage. The only way out was the big door or the side door they were standing in front of. I was trapped. I looked at the BMW. It was my only cover. I slid underneath the car, dragging my body across the cold concrete until I was positioned behind the rear tires. I held my breath. The side door handle jiggled, then the deadbolt turned. The door swung open. Light from the driveway spilled in, cutting across the floor. 2 pairs of feet walked in, high heels and heavy work boots. Emily walked to the tool chest. "Is it in here?" the man asked. "It should be," Emily said. "He said he hid the emergency cash in the chest. We need to pay the lawyer retainer by morning." I watched from under the car as Emily saw the broken lock on the chest. "Someone has been here," she gasped. She reached in and pulled out the duffel bag. She unzipped it. "The cash is here," she said, relieved. "But the book? Where is the ledger?" She frantically tossed the cash onto the floor, digging through the empty bag. "The ledger is gone," she whispered. Her voice trembled with pure terror. "If someone has that ledger," the man said, his voice low and threatening, "then we have a big problem, Emily. That book has names in it, names that do not like to be written down." I tightened my grip on the ledger in my pocket. I was lying 3 feet away from them. If they looked under the car, I was dead. The man sounded like a professional, probably one of the Russo's enforcers checking on their investment. "We have to find it," Emily hissed. "If the police find that book, Terrence is dead, and so am I." They stood there for a moment, the tension radiating off them. "Check the house," the man commanded. "Maybe he moved it." They turned and walked out the side door. I waited 5 seconds. 10. I scrambled out from under the car. I ran to the keypad on the wall and hit the button to open the main garage door. I prayed the manual override worked, despite the jammer. The motor whirred. The door began to rise. I did not wait for it to open fully. I rolled under the rising door and sprinted into the night. I ran back to my rental car, my heart pounding like a drum. I threw the ledger onto the passenger seat and peeled away from the curb. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And now I knew the clock was ticking. Terrence had 1 week to pay $3 million. He was desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. I was going to make sure his next mistake was his last. I drove back to the motel, the neon sign guiding me like a lighthouse. I had work to do. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was fighting a war against a timeline, and I intended to win. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed outside my window, a rhythmic electric hum that matched the throbbing in my temples. I sat at the small, wobbly desk, the heavy laptop Rachel had brought me, open in front of me. The screen was a portal back into the life I had been forced to leave behind. I typed in the encryption key for Protocol Omega. The screen flickered from black to a grid of gray static before resolving into 12 high-definition feeds. My house, my sanctuary, now occupied by the enemy. I cycled through the cameras. The kitchen was empty, though a bottle of my vintage Dom Perignon sat open on the counter. The living room was dark. I switched to the feed from the guest suite, where Terrence was supposed to be recovering from his near-death experience. The bed was made. The room was empty. I frowned. According to the restraining order Emily had filed, Terrence was bedridden and fragile, traumatized by my alleged attempt on his life. I clicked on the camera for the master bedroom, my bedroom, or rather the bedroom that now legally belonged to the Cross Family Trust. Empty. Then I clicked on the feed for the East Wing. This was Trey and Emily private suite, my sunroom. The image was crisp. The night vision mode turned the room into a ghostly green landscape, but the audio was crystal clear. They were there. Emily was standing by the window, holding a crystal flute filled with sparkling wine. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was a gift Trey had bought her for their anniversary last month. She looked relaxed, triumphant, and sitting on the edge of the bed was Terrence. He was not wearing the neck brace he had worn for his hospital selfie. He was not looking frail or traumatized. He was leaning back on his elbows, laughing. I turned up the volume on the laptop. "Did you see his face?" Terrence asked, his voice smooth and mocking. "Did you see the old man face when the cops cuffed him? It was priceless." Emily turned from the window. She took a sip of the champagne. "It was satisfying," she agreed. "But we are not done yet. We still need the combination to the floor safe in his study. The ledger was gone from your garage, Terrence. That means he has it, or someone else does. We need cash to pay off the Russos before Friday." Terrence waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about the Russos. Once the insurance claim starts processing, they will back off. They know money is coming. The important thing is that Jeremiah is out. He is rotting in a motel somewhere while we drink his wine. He stood up and walked over to Emily. He moved with a predatory grace that made my skin crawl. "We did it, Em," he whispered. "We actually pulled it off." I watched, expecting a high five, a handshake between co-conspirators, a hug between in-laws. Instead, Terrence reached out and ran his hand down Emily's arm. He stepped in close, pressing his body against hers, and she did not pull away. She leaned into him. She tilted her head back. My stomach dropped. The air left my lungs. This was not just a conspiracy for money. This was not just greed. Emily dropped her robe. I stared at the screen, my hand frozen over the mouse. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close the laptop and throw it out the window. But I was a judge. I was trained to look at the evidence, no matter how grotesque it was. I had to witness the crime. They fell onto the bed together. My sunbed. The bed where Trey slept. The bed where they had conceived my grandchildren if they ever planned to have them. They were not just celebrating a victory. They were celebrating a betrayal so deep it defied biology. I watched in a trance of horror as they tangled together. The sounds coming through the speakers were sickening, not because of the act itself, but because of who they were. Aunt and nephew, sister-in-law and brother-in-law. But then the talking started again, and what I heard next shattered whatever remained of my heart. "Does Trey suspect anything?" Terrence asked between breaths. Emily laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Trey," she scoffed. "Trey is an idiot. He suspects nothing. He thinks I am stressed. He thinks I am just trying to protect the family. He is so pathetic, Terrence. He follows me around like a puppy waiting for a treat. He actually thinks I love him." I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. My son, my gentle, quiet son who had never hurt a fly. They were mocking him while they defiled his marriage bed. "He is weak," Terrence said, "just like the old man." "Number," Emily corrected him. "Jeremiah is not weak. He is arrogant. But Trey is soft. He is spineless. I told him to go sleep on the couch in the den because I needed space to process the trauma. He thanked me. He actually thanked me for kicking him out of his own room." They both laughed. It was a sound of pure malice. "I am going to divorce him as soon as the money comes through," Emily said. "I will take half of his share and we will be gone. We can go to Rio or Monaco, anywhere but this boring town." "Rio sounds good," Terrence said. "But first we need to make sure the old man stays buried. We need that insanity plea to stick." "Oh, it will stick," Emily promised. "I put the hallucinogens in his coffee tin before I kicked him out. If he drinks anything from his own supply, he is going to start seeing dragons. By the time the court-ordered psychiatrist evaluates him, his brain will be fried." I sat back in the motel chair, trembling. They had drugged my coffee. That was why I had felt so foggy the morning of the party. That was why I had been so tired. They had been poisoning me for weeks, preparing the ground for their insanity defense. But the poison in my body was nothing compared to the poison in my soul right now. I looked at the screen. They were entangled again, lost in their lust and their victory. I moved the mouse cursor to the record button. I clicked it. Recording saved. I had them. I had proof of the affair. I had proof of the conspiracy. I had proof of the drugging. But as I watched them, I realized that simply winning in court was no longer enough. Sending them to jail was too clean. It was too civilized. They had not just tried to kill me. They had spiritually murdered my son. They had taken a good man and turned him into a joke in his own home. They were laughing at his pain. I closed the laptop. The image of them vanished, but it was burned into my retinas. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. My face was lined with exhaustion, but behind the fatigue there was something new, something cold and hard as diamond. I was done playing defense. I was done gathering evidence for a trial that might happen in 6 months. I needed to destroy them. I needed to tear their lives apart piece by piece. I needed them to turn on each other. I needed to leave them with nothing, not even their freedom. I walked back to the desk and picked up the burner phone. I dialed a number I had memorized from the gambling ledger. It was time to make a deal with the devil, because if Terrence owed $3 million to the Russo crime family, Maybe it was time the Russos knew exactly where their money was going. And as for Emily, I had a special plan for her. A plan that involved my son finally opening his eyes. I sat down and opened a new file on the laptop. I began to type. It was not a legal brief. It was a script for the final act of this tragedy. They wanted a crazy old man. They wanted a villain. I would give them a monster. I checked the time. It was 3 a.m. The sun would rise in 3 hours. By the time it set tomorrow, Emily and Terrence would wish they had drunk that poisoned wine themselves. Protocol Omega was no longer just surveillance. It was an execution order. They did not wait for Monday. Emily filed the ex parte motion at 8 in the morning, and by 9:30, I was being escorted into the family court building through the back entrance. The charge was civil, but the implications were a life sentence. Involuntary commitment. Section 5150. They claimed I was an imminent danger to myself and others due to rapid onset dementia and paranoid delusions. The courtroom was closed to the public. It was a small hearing room with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. My son Trey sat in the front row, his head in his hands. Emily sat next to him, looking like a grieving angel in a modest black dress. She had even brought a handkerchief, which she dabbed at dry eyes whenever the bailiff looked her way. But the real threat was not Emily. It was the man sitting on the bench, Judge Marcus Vance. I had known Vance for 30 years. We had come up through the district attorney office together. He was a political animal, a man who made rulings based on polling numbers rather than the penal code. I had overturned his decisions 12 times when I sat on the Supreme Court. I had publicly criticized his interpretation of property law in a law review article 5 years ago. He hated me with a quiet, simmering jealousy that had aged like vinegar. And now he held the gavel that could strip me of my freedom. "State your name for the record," Vance said, looking down at me over his spectacles. His voice held a tremor of satisfaction. "Jeremiah Cross," I said, standing tall. "You are represented by counsel," Vance asked, looking at Rachel Katz, who stood beside me. "I am," I said, "but I reserve the right to address the court directly." Vance smirked. "We will see about that. The petitioner alleges that you attempted to poison your nephew and have since exhibited erratic, threatening behavior. They have provided an affidavit from your primary care physician stating concerns about cognitive decline. He was talking about the forged note from Dr. Sterling, the one Emily had fabricated. "We are not here to try the criminal case," Vance continued. "We are here to determine if you are mentally competent to stand trial, or if you require immediate institutionalization for your own safety. The petitioner calls Dr. Eris Thorne." I stiffened. Dr. Thorne. I knew the name. He was not a respected psychiatrist. He was a hired gun, a man who specialized in expert testimony for insurance companies, usually arguing that car crash victims were faking their pain. Dr. Thorne walked to the stand. He was a small man with a perfectly trimmed goatee and a suit that cost more than my car. He carried a leather folder which he placed on the witness stand with theatrical precision. "Dr. Thorne," Emily, lawyer, began, "have you examined the respondent, Jeremiah Cross?" "I have reviewed his medical records and the police reports regarding the incident," Thorne said, his voice smooth as oil. "I have also interviewed his family members extensively. And what is your conclusion, doctor?" "In my professional opinion, Mr. Cross is suffering from advanced persecutory delusion complex, likely triggered by early-stage vascular dementia. He believes his family is plotting against him. He believes he is being poisoned. These are classic projection techniques. He tried to kill his nephew because in his confused state, he believed his nephew was a threat. He is highly dangerous and requires a secure lockdown facility for stabilization." I watched Emily. She covered her mouth with her hand, feigning shock at the diagnosis she had paid for. Trey looked like he was going to be sick. The doctor continued. "The family tells me he has been hoarding cash, hiding documents, and speaking to people who are not there. He has disconnected the security systems in his home because he believes they are spying on him. This is a man who has lost his grip on reality." Vance nodded, scribbling notes. "It seems clear-cut. A tragedy, really. A great mind lost to time." He looked at me with mock pity. "Mr. Cross, do you have anything to say before I rule?" Rachel touched my arm. "Let me handle this, Jeremiah. We can ask for a continuance." "Number 1, I whispered. "A continuance just keeps me in limbo. We end this now." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor," I said, my voice booming in the small space, "I would like to cross-examine the witness." Vance frowned. "You have a lawyer, Mr. Cross." "I have 35 years of courtroom experience, Marcus," I said, using his first name deliberately. "Unless you are ruling that I am already incompetent, I have the right to question my accuser." Vance bristled. "Fine. Make it quick. I have a tea time at 1. I turned to Dr. Thorne. He looked bored. He thought this was a formality. He thought I was just a crazy old man who was going to rant about conspiracies. "Dr. Thorne," I said, walking closer to the stand, "you stated that you reviewed my medical records. Which records specifically?" "The files provided by your family," Thorne said, "and the notes from Dr. Sterling. Did you verify these notes with Dr. Sterling directly?" I attempted to call him, but he was unavailable. However, the family affidavit was quite detailed. "So you based a diagnosis of dementia on hearsay and documents provided by the very people trying to lock me up. Is that your standard practice, doctor?" "It is standard in emergency evaluations," Thorne sniffed. "I see." I paced a small circle. "You also mentioned that I am paranoid, that I believe people are spying on me." "Yes, it is a key symptom. And you testified under oath that you have no conflict of interest in this case, that you are an impartial expert." "Absolutely." "I have never met you before today." I stopped pacing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was not a legal document. It was a printout from the Omega logs. Rachel had brought me more than just video feeds. The Omega system didn't just record inside my house. It scraped data. When Terrence connected his phone to my Wi-Fi, the system mirrored his contacts and his GPS history. "Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice dropping to a conversational volume, "do you know a man named Salvatore Russo?" The room went deadly silent. Thorne's eyes flickered. A tiny crack in the porcelain mask. "I do not know that name," he said. "Interesting," I said, "because according to the visitor logs of the West Side Clinic, which you own and operate, Mr. Russo visits you every Tuesday at 4 p.m. And according to the GPS data from my nephew Terrence's phone, he visited your clinic 3 times last week." "Objection," Emily, lawyer, shouted, standing up. "Relevance. It goes to credibility, Your Honor." I roared, spinning toward Vance. "This man claims he is impartial, but I have evidence that he is the primary supplier of prescription narcotics to the Russo crime family, and that he provided the succinylcholine used to poison me." "Lies," Thorne shouted, standing up in the witness box. "This is exactly the paranoia I was talking about. He is inventing conspiracies." "Am I?" I asked. I walked to the bailiff. "Officer, I would like to enter this into evidence. It is a photograph taken by a private investigator yesterday afternoon." I handed the photo to the bailiff, who handed it to Judge Vance. Vance looked at the photo. His face went pale. It was a high-resolution image of Dr. Thorne standing in the alley behind his clinic. He was handing a small white box to Terrence. The timestamp was 2 days before the party. "Succinylcholine requires refrigeration, doctor," I said. "You handed it to him in a cooler box, didn't you?" Thorne sank back into his chair. He looked at Emily. It was a reflex, a look of panic shared between conspirators. I continued, relentless. "And Your Honor, if you check the State Medical Board database right now, you will see that Dr. Thorne's license was flagged 48 hours ago for irregular prescription practices. An investigation initiated by a tip from a concerned citizen. That citizen was me. I had called the board from the motel room 5 minutes after I saw the connection on the Omega logs." I turned back to Thorne. "You are not here to diagnose me, doctor. You are here because you owe the Russos money just like my nephew. And they told you to help Emily bury me so they could get paid. Isn't that right?" Thorne looked at the door. He was calculating the distance. "I plead the fifth," he stammered. Chaos erupted. Judge Vance slammed his gavel. "Order. Order in this court." I turned to Vance. "Your Honor, this witness has just invoked his right against self-incrimination during a competency hearing. His testimony is perjured. The petition is based on fraud, and if you grant this order, Marcus, you will be an accessory to kidnapping." Vance looked at me. He looked at the sweating doctor. He looked at Emily, who was staring at the table, her face a mask of stone. He knew I had won. He hated me, but he loved his career more. If he ruled against me now with this evidence on the record, he would be impeached. "Petition denied," Vance barked, banging the gavel. "Mr. Cross is competent, Doctor. Thorne, you are remanded into custody pending a perjury investigation. Bailiff, take him." "No!" Emily screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "You cannot let him go. He is crazy. He is going to kill us." "Sit down, Mrs. Cross," Vance shouted, "or I will hold you in contempt." I walked over to the plaintiff table. I stood in front of Emily and Trey. I was a free man. My mind was sharp, my record was clean, and my enemies were exposed. I leaned down close to Emily's face. "You missed," I whispered. She looked at me with pure venom. "This isn't over, Jeremiah. You can't go home. We still have the house. We still have the money. You are just a homeless old man with a suit." I straightened up and buttoned my jacket. "I don't need a house, Emily," I said loud enough for Trey to hear. "I have the truth. And by the time I am done with you, the only house you will be living in will have bars on the windows." I turned to Trey. He was trembling, looking back and forth between his wife and his father. "Make a choice, son," I said. "The clock is ticking." I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Rachel was right behind me, grinning like a shark. "That was beautiful," she said as we hit the hallway. "I have never seen Vance move that fast." "It was a skirmish, Rachel," I said, not breaking my stride. "We won the battle, but they still hold the high ground. They have my assets. They have my home." "So what is the next move?" she asked. "The next move is financial," I said. "They think they cut me off. They think I am destitute." I stopped at the elevator and pressed the button. It is time to show them what happens when you try to spend money that does not belong to you. I checked my watch. It was noon. At 1 p.m., Emily and Terrence were scheduled to meet with a buyer for my vintage car collection. They were trying to liquidate my tangible assets for cash. "Let us go to the bank, Rachel," I said as the elevator doors opened. "I have a withdrawal to make, and then I have a car sale to crash." The real pain was about to begin. I sat in the passenger seat of Rachel Katz's car, watching the live feed from my garage on the laptop. The connection was stable, the audio crisp enough to hear the desperation in their voices. Emily and Terrence were standing between my pristine 1967 Shelby Mustang and the Jaguar E-Type. They looked like cornered rats. Terrence was pacing, holding his phone to his ear. His face was a mask of sheer terror. I turned up the volume. "I know the deadline, Sal," Terrence was pleading, his voice trembling. "I have the money. Well, I have assets. I just need 24 hours to liquidate. No, please, do not send anyone to the house. The police are already watching the perimeter." He pulled the phone away from his ear, wincing. Even through the laptop speakers, I could hear the screaming on the other end. It was a guttural, violent sound. "They are going to cut them off, Em," Terrence whimpered, dropping the phone into his pocket. "Sal said if he does not see a wire transfer by midnight, he is sending a crew to take my thumbs. He said, I do not need thumbs to sign a check." Emily's face was pale, but her eyes were hard. She was not scared for him, she was scared for herself. She knew that if the Russos came for Terrence, they would not stop at the front door. They would burn the whole house down to get their payment. "We sell the cars," Emily snapped, pointing at the collection. "The old man loves these rust buckets more than he loves us. That Shelby alone is worth $250,000. We sell the whole fleet, cash only, half price for a quick sale." "But the title," Terrence argued. "The titles are in the safe. We cannot open it." "We do not need titles for an export sale, you idiot," Emily hissed. "I called a guy, a collector from Dubai. He does not care about paperwork. He just wants the metal. He is on his way now. He is bringing a transporter." I watched them scrambling like insects under a magnifying glass. They were selling my legacy for pennies on the dollar to save their own skins. The Shelby was the first car I ever restored. It took me 5 years of weekends. Every bolt, every coat of paint was a memory of patience and precision, and they were treating it like a pawn shop trinket. Rachel looked over at me. "Are you ready, Jeremiah?" I nodded. "Drive," I said. We pulled up to the gate just as a massive black hauler truck was backing into my driveway. A man in a flashy suit was shaking hands with Terrence, the buyer. He looked slick, the kind of man who asked no questions as long as the price was low enough. Terrence was sweating, pointing frantically at the cars, urging the driver to load them faster. Emily was standing by the garage door, arms crossed, tapping her foot. I stepped out of Rachel's car. I was flanked by 2 sheriff deputies. I had called Sheriff Barnes, an old fishing buddy of mine, 30 minutes ago. I told him there was grand theft auto in progress at my residence. The sight of the uniforms froze the scene. The buyer stopped halfway to the Shelby, his hand on the door handle. Terrence looked up, his eyes widening in horror. "Step away from the vehicles," the lead deputy shouted, his hand resting on his holster. "Officer, thank God," Emily shouted, immediately switching into her victim persona. "These men are trying to steal our cars. We were just trying to stop them." The buyer looked at Emily, then at Terrence. "You said you were the owners," he growled. "I do not do business with cops involved." He signaled his driver. The hauler engine roared to life. "Wait!" Terrence screamed, grabbing the buyer arm. "Do not leave. We have a deal. Tell them, Em. Tell them it is our property." The deputy stepped forward, pushing Terrence back. "Nobody is moving any property," the deputy said. "We received a report of unauthorized sale of assets belonging to the Jeremiah Cross Charitable Foundation." Emily froze. "Foundation?" She repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. I walked forward, then stepping into the light of the garage. "That is right, Emily," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Jeremiah," she gasped. "You are violating the restraining order. Officer, arrest him. He is not allowed within 100 feet of us." The deputy looked at me, then at the paperwork Rachel handed him. "Mr. Cross is here as the honorary chairman of the foundation to identify the stolen goods, ma'am," the deputy said calmly. "And according to these documents, these vehicles do not belong to Jeremiah Cross, the individual. They belong to the Cross Youth Scholarship Fund." I smiled. "You see, Emily, while you were busy forging power of attorney documents last week, I was busy doing some actual estate planning. I transferred the title of every vehicle in this garage to a blind trust, 48 hours before the party. The paperwork was filed and notarized the morning of the dinner." Terrence looked at the Shelby. He looked at me. He looked at his thumbs. "You gave them away," he whispered. "You gave millions of dollars of cars to a charity, just to spite us." "I did not give them away to spite you, Terrence," I said, walking over to the Shelby and running my hand along the hood. "I gave them away because I knew you would try to sell them. I knew that the moment you got desperate, you would come for the things I loved. So I put them out of your reach. These cars are now assets of a non-profit organization. Selling them is not just theft, it is embezzlement from a charity. That is a federal crime." The buyer did not wait to hear more. He jumped into his truck cab, and the hauler peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching, leaving black marks on the pavement. Terrence fell to his knees. He was sobbing, dry, heaving breaths. "Sal is going to kill me," he moaned. "He is going to cut me into pieces." Emily stared at me with hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You planned this," she hissed. "You knew." "I knew you were greedy, Emily," I said. "And I knew you were stupid. That is a dangerous combination." The deputies began to tape off the garage. "You two need to leave the premises," the deputy said to Emily and Terrence. "This garage is now a crime scene." "But we live here," Emily shrieked. "Not in the garage, you do not," the deputy said. "Get inside. And do not touch these cars again or you will leave in handcuffs." I watched them retreat into the house. They looked small, defeated, but I knew it wasn't over. Terrence was terrified, but fear makes people do irrational things. I turned to Rachel. "Let us go," I said. "Phase 1 is complete." We got back in the car. "Where to now?" Rachel asked. "The Golden Palace Casino," I said. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You are a betting man now, Jeremiah." "No," I said, checking my watch. "But Terrence is. He has one card left to play, literally. The Black Centurion card I gave him as a supplementary user on my account 5 years ago. He thinks it is his lifeline. He thinks he can go to the high-limit tables and win back what he owes the Russos." We drove to the casino. It was a gaudy tower of glass and lights on the riverfront. I knew Terrence's habits. When he was stressed, he gambled. When he was scared, he gambled. It was his addiction and his coping mechanism. I did not go inside. I did not need to. I had the banking app on the laptop. I parked in the lot and waited. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, a taxi pulled up. Terrence jumped out. He was alone. He must have snuck out the back door while Emily was screaming at the deputies. He looked manic. He was talking to himself. He ran inside. I opened the laptop and logged into the credit card admin portal. I saw the transaction attempt almost immediately. Request: $50,000 in chips, Golden Palace Casino. Pending. I hovered my finger over the decline button, but I didn't press it yet. I wanted him to feel the hope first. I wanted him to stand at the cage, watch the cashier count the chips, and think he was saved. I waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. By now he would be smiling. His heart rate would be slowing down. He would be fantasizing about the lucky streak that would solve all his problems. Now, I clicked report lost or stolen. Then I clicked freeze account. Status: declined. Card canceled. I imagined the scene inside. The cashier face changing from polite to suspicious. The security guard stepping closer. Terrence stammering, trying to explain swiping the card again and again. The humiliation of being rejected in the one place he felt like a king. A few minutes later, the casino doors burst open. Terrence was thrown out, literally. 2 large bouncers dragged him by the arms and tossed him onto the sidewalk. He landed hard on his hands and knees. He scrambled up, screaming at the doors. "Do you know who I am?" he yelled, his voice cracking. "My uncle is Judge Cross. This is a mistake." "Run it again." The bouncers stood with their arms crossed, unimpressed. Terrence kicked the air in frustration. He pulled his phone out and dialed a number. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. Nephew calling. I let it ring. I watched him through the windshield. He was pacing, pulling at his hair, screaming into the voicemail. "Uncle Jeremiah, please, pick up. It was a mistake. I did not mean to do it. They made me. Emily made me. I need money, just a loan. I will pay you back, I swear. They are going to kill me, Uncle. Please." He was begging. The arrogance was gone. The bravado was gone. There was only a scared little boy who had played a man game and lost. I did not feel pity. I felt a cold resolution. He had tried to kill me. He had tried to steal my life. And now he wanted me to save him from the consequences of his own choices. I declined the call. Then I sent him a text message. It was a photo of the gambling ledger I had taken from his garage, and a short message. "I know about Sal. Good luck." I saw him read the message. I saw his knees buckle. He sat down on the curb, right there in front of the casino, burying his face in his hands. He was broken. He was broke. He was alone. But I was not done. Emily was still in the house, and she was the one pulling the strings. Terrence was just the muscle, the addict. Emily was the architect. I turned to Rachel. "Take me back to the motel," I said. "Why?" Rachel asked, watching Terrence's figure shrink in the rearview mirror. "Because the rats are turning on each other," I said. "Tonight, Emily is going to realize that her golden goose is cooked. And when she realizes that, she is going to take her anger out on the only person left she can control. My son, Trey. I needed to be watching the feeds when she snapped, because that was the moment I would get my son back, or lose him forever." I sat in the darkness of room 12 at the Starlight Motel and watched my son's marriage disintegrate in real time. It was painful to witness. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, where the passengers are people you love, and the vehicle is your own legacy. On the laptop screen, the feed from the living room showed a scene of domestic devastation. The house was quiet, but the air was thick with the poisonous fumes of failure. Emily was pacing the Persian rug I had bought in Istanbul 20 years ago. She was holding a bottle of scotch by the neck, swinging it like a club. Her hair was wild, her makeup smeared. She looked like a cornered animal that had just realized the trap was shut. Trey sat on the edge of the sofa. He looked small. He looked defeated. He was wringing his hands, a nervous tic he had developed in childhood whenever I raised my voice. "We are ruined, Trey," Emily screamed, her voice distorting the microphone. "Do you understand that? The cars are gone. The accounts are frozen. Terrence is an idiot who got himself banned from the only casino that would take his credit. We have nothing. It will be okay, Em," Trey said softly. He reached out a hand to touch her arm. "We can talk to Dad. If we just explain to him." "Do not touch me," Emily shrieked, pulling away as if his touch burned her. "Talk to him. Are you stupid? He hates us. He planned this. He is sitting somewhere laughing at us while we drown. And what did you do today, Trey? Did you help?" "No. You stood there like a statue while the police took our future away." "I tried," Trey stammered. "I tried to tell the deputy." "You are useless," Emily spat the words out. "You have always been useless. I married you because I thought you came with a checkbook. I thought you would inherit the kingdom. but you are just a placeholder. You are a weak, pathetic little man who cannot even protect his wife." I watched Trey flinch. It was not a physical blow, but it hit him harder than a fist. He looked up at her, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "I love you, Emily," he whispered. "Why are you saying these things?" "Because I am tired of pretending," she yelled. She threw the scotch bottle. It smashed against the fireplace, shattering into 1,000 amber shards. The sound made Trey jump. "Look at you," she sneered. "You are shaking. You are afraid of your own shadow. God, I wish you were more like him." "Like who?" Trey asked, his voice trembling. "Like Terrence," she shouted. The name hung in the room. "Terrence is a man," Emily continued, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "He takes risks. He fights for what he wants. He tried to fix this. He tried to secure our future while you were crying about your daddy feelings. Terrence is twice the man you are, Trey, in every way that matters." She covered her mouth instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. Trey stared at her. He blinked slowly, as if he was trying to process a foreign language. "What did you say?" he asked. "Nothing," Emily snapped, turning away. "I am drunk. I am going to bed. Do not follow me." She stormed out of the room, leaving Trey sitting alone amidst the broken glass and the ruins of his dignity. I watched my son on the screen. He did not move for a long time. He just stared at the spot where she had been standing. The insult had lodged itself deep in his mind. "Twice the man you are." It was a specific comparison. It was a comparison that implied knowledge, intimate knowledge. I saw the change happen. It was subtle. His shoulders straightened just a fraction. He wiped his face. He stood up. He did not go to the den where he had been banished. He walked toward the master suite. I switched the camera feed. Emily was passed out on the bed, fully clothed. The emotional exhaustion and the alcohol had knocked her out cold. Her phone was on the nightstand, plugged into the charger. The screen lit up every few seconds with notifications. Trey stood in the doorway watching her. He looked at her, not with love, but with a dawning horror. He stepped into the room. He moved silently, a ghost in his own house. He picked up the phone. I held my breath. I knew Emily's passcode. It was her birthday. I wondered if Trey knew it. He typed in 4 digits, the phone unlocked. I watched his face in the pale glow of the screen. He scrolled. His eyes widened. He stopped scrolling. He read. I knew what he was seeing. I had seen the texts myself when I hacked into the cloud. Messages from Terrence, photos, plans for their life in Rio after I was dead, jokes about Trey gullibility. I saw my son break. He put a hand over his mouth to stifle a sob. He doubled over as if he had been punched in the gut. He dropped the phone on the carpet. He looked at his sleeping wife. For a second I saw a flash of rage in his eyes, so intense I thought he might hurt her. I reached for my phone, ready to call the police to stop him from committing a crime of passion. But Trey was not violent. He was hurt. He backed away from the bed. He grabbed his car keys from the dresser. He ran out of the room. I switched back to the exterior cameras. I saw him burst out the front door into the rain that had started to fall. He got into his sedan and peeled out of the driveway without turning on his headlights. I picked up my burner phone. I sent him a single text message, a location pin, room 12, Starlight Motel. I waited. 30 minutes later, headlights swept across the grimy curtains of my room. A car door slammed, then a hesitant knock. I opened the door. Trey stood in the rain. He was soaked to the bone. His clothes were plastered to his skin, and water dripped from his nose and chin. He was shivering violently, but I did not think it was from the cold. He looked at me. His eyes were red and raw. He looked like he had aged 10 years and 10 hours. "Dad," he choked out. I did not say anything. I just stepped back and opened the door wider. He walked in. He stood in the center of the cheap motel room, dripping water onto the stained carpet. He looked around at the peeling wallpaper, the narrow bed, the laptop set up with the surveillance feeds. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew everything." I nodded. "I knew, son." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you let me live like that? Why did you let me believe she loved me?" "Because you would not have believed me," I said gently. "If I had told you yesterday that your wife was sleeping with your cousin and planning to kill your father, you would have called me insane. You would have signed the commitment papers yourself. You had to see it. You had to find it." Trey's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, burying his face in his hands. He wept. It was a guttural, ugly sound, the sound of a man mourning the death of his life. I sat down on the floor next to him. I put my arm around his shoulders. It was the first time I had hugged my son in years. He leaned into me, sobbing like a child. She said he was twice the man I was. Trey gasped between sobs. She sent him pictures, Dad. Pictures in our bed. She called me a placeholder. She said she was just waiting for the check to clear. I held him tight. I let him cry. I let him purge the poison of her lies. I am sorry, Dad, he said, eventually lifting his head. I am so sorry. I brought the papers to the jail. I tried to get you to sign. I helped her. I helped her hurt you. You were manipulated, Trey, I said. You were under a spell, but the spell is broken now. He wiped his eyes with his wet sleeve. He looked at the laptop screen. He saw the feed of Emily sleeping. I want to kill her, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I want to go back there and burn the house down with them inside. Number one, I said firmly. That is what they do. That is how criminals think. We are not criminals, Trey. We are crosses. We use the law. We use the truth. And we use their own greed against them. Trey looked at me. His eyes were hard now. The weakness was gone, burned away by the pain. What do we do? He asked. I stood up and helped him to his feet. I went to the small kitchenette and poured him a glass of water. We are going to finish this, I said. We are going to give them exactly what they want, or what they think they want. I handed him the water. Tomorrow morning, you are going to go back to that house. You are going to apologize to Emily. You are going to tell her that you were upset, but you realized she was right. You are going to play the role of the submissive husband one last time. Trey's jaw tightened. I do not know if I can look at her without vomiting. You can, I said, because you know that the end is coming. You are going to tell her a secret that I am going to give you right now. What secret? You are going to tell her that I called you, that I was delirious, that I was rambling about the gold. Gold? Trey asked, confused. We do not have any gold. Emily does not know that, I said, and Terrence certainly does not know that. You are going to tell them that in my madness, I confess that the real fortune is not in the bank accounts. It is buried. Buried where? Under the floorboards of the old hunting cabin in the woods, I said, the one nobody has visited in 20 years. Trey frowned. That old shack. There is nothing there but rot and rats. Exactly, I said. But to a desperate woman and a man who owes $3 million to the mob, it will sound like salvation. You are going to tell them that there is $10 million in bearer bonds and gold bars hidden in a safe beneath the floor. And you are going to tell them that I am the only one who knows the combination, but that I wrote it down in a notebook I keep in my pocket. Trey began to understand. A grim smile touched his lips. They will go there, he said. They will run there, I corrected. Especially when you tell them that I am planning to go there tomorrow night to move it. But what happens when they get there? Trey asked. It is in the middle of nowhere. There is no cell service. I walked to the laptop and pulled up a schematic. It was a blueprint I had drawn up hours ago. I am going to prepare the cabin, Trey. I am going to turn it into a stage. And when they break in looking for gold, they are going to find something else entirely. What will they find? A verdict, I said. I looked my son in the eye. This is the hard part, Trey. You have to lie to her face. You have to let her kiss you. You have to let her think she has won. Can you do that? Trey looked at the screen one last time, at the sleeping form of the woman who had destroyed his heart. I can do it, he said. I want to see her face when the trap snaps shut. Good, I said. Get some sleep, son. You take the bed. I have work to do. Trey lay down on the lumpy mattress. He fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted by grief. I sat back at the desk. I had a busy night ahead of me. I needed to buy supplies, cameras, microphones, and a very specific type of heavy-duty lock. The hunting cabin was about to become the most important courtroom of my life. And this time, there would be no appeals. The sun had not yet risen when I initiated the final phase of the operation. I sat in the cramped bathroom of the Starlight Motel and stared at my reflection in the grimy mirror. I looked terrible. My eyes were sunken, my skin was gray, and I had not shaved in 48 hours. For once, I did not need makeup to look like a dying man. I looked like a ghost, and that was exactly what I needed to be. I picked up the burner phone. I dialed Trey number. I knew he was parked just down the street, gathering the courage to go back into the lion's den. "Answer the phone, son," I whispered. "It is showtime." Trey picked up on the second ring. "Dad?" he asked. "Listen carefully, Trey," I rasped, pitching my voice to sound weak and breathless. "I need you to play this recording for her. Do not just tell her. Play it. It has to sound real. It has to sound like a deathbed confession." I pressed the record button on the app. I took a shallow, ragged breath. I let my voice tremble with a mixture of pain and delirium. "Trey," I wheezed into the microphone. "Trey, listen to me. My chest, it hurts. I think this is it. The pills. They work too well. I am dying, son. But I cannot die with this secret. The banks, the accounts, they are just decoys. The real money, the gold, it is under the floor. The hunting cabin. 10 million in bullion, Trey. I buried it in '95. I am going there now. I have to see it one last time. I have to give you the combination. Meet me there. Please. Do not let Emily get it. It is for you." I stopped recording. I played it back. It was pathetic. It was desperate. It was perfect. I sent the audio file to Trey. "Play that for her," I told him. "Tell her I called you 5 minutes ago, and then the line went dead. Tell her you tracked my phone to the highway heading north toward the woods." "I understand," Trey said. His voice was steady. He was ready. "Good luck, son," I said. I hung up and immediately went to work. I packed the surveillance equipment into the rental car. I checked my own supplies, a heavy-duty padlock, a flare gun, and the laptop. I checked out of the motel, leaving the key on the nightstand. I did not need the room anymore. By tonight, I would either be back in my own bed or I would be dead. I drove out of the city as the first gray light of dawn touched the skyline. The forecast called for a massive storm front moving in from the west. Heavy rain, thunder, lightning. Nature was setting the stage for me. It was poetic. I drove north toward the dense pine forests that bordered the state line. The hunting cabin was a relic, a small wooden structure on 40 acres of land I had bought decades ago and rarely visited. It was isolated off the grid and rotting. It was the perfect trap. While I drove, I monitored the audio feed from my son phone. I had installed a tracker and a listening app on his device when he was at the motel. He did not know about it. In war, you do not trust anyone completely, not even your own soldiers. I heard the sound of a car door opening, then footsteps, the sound of a key turning in a lock. Trey was home. I turned up the volume on the car speakers. "Where the hell have you been?" Emily's voice cut through the static. She sounded shrill, hungover and furious. "I woke up and you were gone. Did you go crying to your daddy?" Trey did not answer immediately. I heard him walking into the kitchen. I heard the sound of water being poured. "I asked you a question, Trey," Emily screamed. "Look at me when I am talking to you." "He called me," Trey said softly. His voice sounded hollow, broken. "Who?" "Your father. Is he coming back here to beg?" "He is dying, Emily," Trey said. He sounded like he was in shock. "He called me. He was slurring his words. He said his chest hurt. He said he took something." Emily laughed. It was a cruel, incredulous sound. "Good. I hope he rots. Did he tell you where the ledger is before he croaked?" "He told me something else," Trey said. "He sent me a voice message. He was delirious. He was talking about money, a lot of money." The silence that followed was electric. I could practically hear Emily's ears pricking up. Greed was a physical force with her. It overrode her anger. It overrode her caution. "What money?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Trey played the recording. My wheezing voice filled the silence of the kitchen. "The real money. The gold. It is under the floor. The hunting cabin. 10 million in bullion." I held my breath as I drove down the highway. This was the pivot point. If she did not buy it, the whole plan failed. 10 million, Emily breathed. Gold. She said the word like a prayer. "Is he lying?" she asked sharply. "Does he really have a cabin?" "Yes," Trey said. "He bought it years ago. He never let anyone go there. He always said it was unsafe. He said the floor was rotting. Because he dug it up," Emily shouted. Her voice was manic now, rising in pitch. "He dug up the floor to hide the gold. That sneaky old bastard. He has been sitting on $10 million in gold while we scraped by." She was pacing. I could hear her heels clicking frantically on the tile. "Where is he now?" she demanded. "He said he was going there," Trey said. "He wants to give me the combination." Emily laughed again, but this time it was triumphant. "Give you the combination?" she scoffed. "You would probably lose it." "No, we are going there. We are going to get that gold, Trey. And if your father is dying, we are going to help him along." She pulled out her phone. I heard the distinct tones of her dialing a number. "Terrence," she barked into the phone. "Wake up. I do not care if you are hung over. Get over here. Now." "We found the money. Yes, all of it. 10 million. Gold. Bring the truck. And bring the crowbars. We have a floor to rip up." I smiled as I turned off the highway onto the dirt road that led to the woods. The bait was taken. The hook was set. They were coming. I arrived at the cabin an hour ahead of them. The sky had turned a bruised purple, and the wind was whipping the tops of the pine trees. The storm was hitting early. Rain began to spit against the windshield as I parked the rental car deep in the brush, covering it with a camouflage tarp I had bought at an army surplus store. I approached the cabin. It was a sad, sagging structure with boarded-up windows and a roof that looked like it would collapse if a squirrel sat on it. But the frame was solid oak. It was stronger than it looked. I unlocked the heavy padlock on the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled of mold and rat droppings. I did not care. I moved quickly. I set up the cameras first. 3 of them. One wide angle covering the main room. One focused on the trap door in the center of the floor. One hidden in the rafters pointing down. I connected them to a mobile hotspot that ran on a satellite signal. I checked the feed on my phone. Perfect. Then I prepared the gold. There was no gold, of course, but there was a safe, a heavy, antique iron safe that I had moved here years ago to store tools. It was locked and rusted shut. It looked impressive. It looked like it held secrets. I dragged it into the center of the room. I pried up 2 of the rotting floorboards and wedged the safe into the hole, so only the top was visible. I scattered sawdust and dirt over it to make it look like it had been buried for years. Then I set the trap. I checked my watch. They would be here in 20 minutes. I went out the back door and locked it from the outside. I circled around to a small shed about 50 yards away, hidden in the thicket. This was my command center. I had run a power cable here years ago. I plugged in the laptop. I sat down and waited. The rain began to fall harder, drumming on the metal roof of the shed. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the ground. It was a perfect night for a gothic horror story. On the screen I saw headlights cutting through the trees. A large pickup truck bounced down the muddy track. It was Terrence's truck. They stopped in front of the cabin. The engine cut off. The doors opened. Emily jumped out first. She was wearing a yellow raincoat that cost $500 and holding a flashlight. She looked manic. Her eyes were wide, and she was grinning like a shark that smells blood. Terrence stumbled out of the driver's side. He looked wrecked. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes wild. He was holding a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a black pistol in the other. A gun. I stiffened. I had expected them to bring tools. I had expected violence. But a gun changed the equation. Terrence was not just desperate. He was lethal. He was planning to execute anyone who stood between him and that money. "Get out, Trey," Terrence shouted, kicking the back door of the truck. Trey stepped out. He was soaked instantly by the rain. He walked with his head down, playing the part of the defeated hostage. "Where is he?" Emily yelled, shining her flashlight at the dark cabin. "Where is the old man?" "His car is not here," Terrence said, looking around. "Maybe he crashed on the way. Who cares? We do not need him. We just need the floor." "Get the crowbars," Emily ordered. Terrence reached into the truck bed and pulled out 2 heavy iron crowbars. He tossed one to Trey. It landed in the mud at his feet. "Pick it up," Terrence snarled, waving the gun. "You are going to dig, cousin. You are going to dig until your hands bleed." They marched toward the cabin door. Emily tried the handle. Locked. "Break it down," she screamed over the sound of the thunder. Terrence stepped up and kicked the door. The wood splintered. He kicked it again. The door flew open, banging against the inside wall. They poured inside. I watched on the monitor as they stood in the center of the room, shining their flashlights around. The cabin was empty, except for a few broken chairs and the hole in the floor where I had planted the safe. "There," Emily shrieked, pointing at the floorboards. "Look, the dirt is fresh." She ran to the hole and fell to her knees. She clawed at the loose wood and dirt with her bare, manicured hands. "It is here," she screamed. "I feel metal. Terrence, get over here." Terrence ran over. He jammed the crowbar under the floorboard and heaved. The wood snapped with a loud crack. They ripped up the floor, revealing the top of the rusted iron safe. "Jackpot," Terrence yelled. His face was twisted with greed. "We are rich. We are saved." "Open it," Emily commanded. "Open it now." Terrence smashed the lock with the crowbar. Sparks flew. The old iron held fast. "It is stuck," he panted. "I need the combination." He turned to Trey. "Where is the notebook?" he demanded, pointing the gun at Trey's chest. "He said he gave you the notebook." Trey stood by the door. He looked at the gun. He looked at his wife kneeling in the dirt. He looked at his cousin, who was ready to kill him for a box of rusty tools. "I do not have it," Trey said calmly. "He lied. He said he would give it to me when I got here." "You are lying," Emily hissed, standing up. She walked over to Trey, her face contorted with rage. "You are trying to keep it for yourself. Give us the code, Trey, or I swear to God I will let Terrence shoot you." "I do not know it, Emily," Trey said. Terrence cocked the pistol. The sound was loud in the small room. "I have 3,000,000 reasons to pull this trigger, Trey," Terrence said, his voice shaking. "Give me the code, or you die right here." I leaned forward in the shed. This was it. The line was crossed. Conspiracy to commit murder. Assault with a deadly weapon. Attempted murder. "Do it, Terrence," Emily screamed. "Shoot him. We can say the old man did it. We can say Jeremiah went crazy and shot his son. Nobody will know. Just get that safe open." That was the sentence that sealed her fate. She had just ordered the execution of her husband. I typed a command into the laptop. It was time to turn on the lights. Inside the cabin, the floodlights I had mounted in the rafters blazed to life. The room went from shadow to blinding white brightness in a nanosecond. Emily screamed, covering her eyes. Terrence spun around, waving the gun blindly. "What is happening?" he yelled. A loud electronic beep echoed through the room, followed by the sound of feedback. Then my voice boomed from the hidden speakers. "Smile for the camera," I said. "You are live." The storm outside was a physical weight hammering against the rotting walls of the cabin with a violence that felt personal. Thunder shook the ground, vibrating up through the floorboards and into the soles of my feet, even out here in the shed. On my laptop screen, the interior of the cabin was a scene from a nightmare, illuminated by the erratic beams of flashlights. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of ancient mold stirred up by the frenzy of two people who had lost their minds to greed. Terrence and Emily were animals. There was no other way to describe them. They were on their hands and knees in the dirt, clawing at the wood. Emily's yellow raincoat was smeared with mud, her hair plastered to her face by the rain and sweat. She had abandoned the flashlight to grab a loose piece of timber, ripping it up with a strength I did not know she possessed. Her fingernails, usually perfectly manicured, were likely breaking and bleeding, but she did not seem to feel it. "Faster, Terrence," she screamed over the roar of the wind. "Dig faster. It is right here. I can feel it." Terrence was hacking at the floor with the crowbar. Every strike sent splinters flying into the air. He was grunting with every blow, a guttural sound of exertion and desperation. He looked deranged. His eyes were wide and white in the flashlight beam, pupils dilated by adrenaline and fear. He was not digging for gold anymore. He was digging for his life. He was digging to keep his fingers attached to his hands. I watched Trey standing near the door. He was shivering. He looked at his wife and his cousin, and he saw what I saw. He saw the monster beneath the skin. He saw the raw, ugly truth of who they were when the lights were off, and the money was on the line. He looked terrified, not just for his safety but for his soul. He had shared a bed with this woman. He had planned a future with her. And now he was watching her tear apart a floor with her bare hands, like a ghoul digging up a grave. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, making the single bulb I had rigged in the rafters flicker ominously. Shadows danced across the walls, stretching and warping into grotesque shapes. It was a scene from hell, and I was the devil, watching from the pit. "Got it," Terrence yelled. His crowbar struck something hard. A metallic clang rang out, cutting through the noise of the storm. He dropped the tool and began scooping away dirt and rotten wood with his hands. Emily scrambled over to him, pushing him aside to get a better look. They cleared the debris, revealing the top of the iron safe I had planted. It was rusted, pitted, and heavy-looking. To them, it looked like a treasure chest buried by a paranoid old man 20 years ago. "It is real," Emily gasped. She ran her hands over the cold metal, caressing the rust as if it were silk. "It is actually real. $10 million. "Open it," Terrence demanded. He grabbed the handle and yanked. The safe did not budge. It was locked tight, the mechanism seized by years of rust and neglect. "It is locked," he shouted, kicking the iron box. "Of course it is locked, you idiot," Emily snapped. "It is a safe. Get the drill, get the saw, do something." "We do not have a drill," Terrence yelled back. "We just have the crowbars." He jammed the tip of the crowbar into the seam of the door and put his entire weight behind it. The metal groaned, but it did not give. He strained his face, turning red, veins popping in his neck. He screamed in frustration and slammed the crowbar against the side of the safe again and again, sparks flying in the dim light. "Stop it," Emily shrieked, grabbing his arm. "You are going to jam it. We need the combination." She turned slowly toward the door. She turned toward Trey. The beam of her flashlight cut across the room and landed on my son's face. He flinched, shielding his eyes. "Trey," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low register. "Come here." Trey did not move. "I do not know it, Em," he said, his voice shaking. "I told you. Dad said he would give it to me when we met here. He never gave it to me. Do not lie to me," Emily hissed, stepping over the hole in the floor. "You are his son. He trusts you. He sent you the message. He must have told you the code." "He was delirious," Trey pleaded, backing up against the wall. "He was dying. He was not making sense. He just said it was here." "Liar," Terrence roared. He scrambled up from the floor, abandoning the safe. He marched toward Trey, the crowbar still clutched in his hand. "You were trying to cut us out. You want it all for yourself, don't you? You want to wait until we leave and then open it." "No," Trey said, holding up his hands. "I swear, I do not want any of it. I just want to go home." "Home," Emily laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound. "We do not have a home, Trey. We have nothing. We have debts. We have eviction notices. This box is the only thing standing between us and the street, and you are going to open it." She stopped inches from him. She grabbed the lapels of his soaked jacket and slammed him against the wall. "Think, Trey," she screamed in his face. "Think hard. What is the code? Is it his birthday? Is it your birthday? Is it the date he bought this God-forsaken land?" "I do not know," Trey cried, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "We tried birthdays. We tried anniversaries. Nothing works." Terrence threw the crowbar down. It landed with a heavy thud. He reached into the waistband of his jeans. I held my breath in the shed. This was the moment, the escalation. Terrence pulled out the gun. It was a black semi-automatic pistol, cheap and ugly. He held it awkwardly, his hand trembling, but the barrel was pointed straight at Trey's chest. "Enough games," Terrence said, his voice trembling with a terrifying mix of fear and rage. "I am not playing anymore, Trey. The Russos gave me until Friday. Today is Wednesday. If I do not have this money, I am dead. And if I am dead, I am taking you with me." Terrence put the gun down. Trey said, his voice barely a whisper, "You are not going to shoot me. We are family." "Family?" Terrence spat. "Family pays their debts. Family does not hide $10 million from the people who need it. Give me the code." I watched my son. He was looking down the barrel of a gun held by his cousin. He was looking at his wife, who was standing next to the gunman, waiting for an answer. And in that moment, the last vestige of his innocence died. He realized that they would kill him. He realized that to them, he was worth less than the metal in that box. "I really do not know it," Trey said softly. "And even if I did, I would not give it to you." The defiance in his voice surprised them. It surprised me. "What did you say?" Emily asked, stepping back. "I said no," Trey repeated louder this time. "I am done. I am done helping you destroy my father. I am done letting you treat me like garbage. Shoot me if you want, Terrence, but I am not opening that safe." Terrence's face twisted. He looked at Emily, panic rising in his eyes. He did not know what to do. He was a gambler, not a killer. He needed a push, and Emily gave it to him. She looked at Trey with a cold calculation that was more terrifying than the gun. She looked at him, and she decided he was a liability. She decided he was the only witness. She decided he was useless. "Do it," she said. Terrence looked at her. "What?" "Kill him," she screamed. Her face contorted into a mask of pure hate. "Kill him, Terrence. He knows the code. He is just holding out, or he will go to the police. We cannot let him leave here, Emily." Trey gasped. "Shut up," Emily yelled at her husband. "I am sick of you. I am sick of your weakness. I am sick of your whining. You are a millstone around my neck, Trey. You have been dragging me down for 10 years. You could not even inherit right. You let your father live too long." She turned to Terrence, grabbing his arm, shaking him. "Shoot him!" she shrieked. "Shoot him, and we can blow the safe open. We can say it was an accident. We can say the old man went crazy and shot him. We can say anything. Just get him out of the way. Then we will have it all. The gold, the freedom, everything." Terrence's hands steadied. The peer pressure, the desperation, the greed. It all coalesced into a single point of focus. He looked at Trey. He tightened his finger on the trigger. "I am sorry, cousin," he whispered. In the shed, I slammed my hand onto the enter key. The trap was sprung. The cabin, which had been a dark tomb of shadows, instantly erupted into blinding white light. The industrial floodlights I had rigged in the rafters clicked on, bathing the room in an intensity that rivaled the sun. Terrence screamed, dropping the gun as he covered his eyes. Emily shrieked, stumbling back and falling over the debris of the floor. Trey slumped against the wall, shielding his face. The speakers crackled to life. My voice, amplified and distorted by the high gain, boomed through the small space, shaking the dust from the ceiling. "Smile, Emily," I said. "You are on camera." The silence that followed was absolute. They froze, blinking in the harsh light like deer in headlights. The gun lay on the floor between them. The safe sat unopened in the dirt, and the truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I stepped out of the shed and walked toward the cabin into the rain. It was time to deliver the verdict. The blinding white light from the rafters did not just illuminate the cabin, it purified it. It stripped away the shadows where my family had hidden their sins for 25 years. Terrence screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure animal terror, and dropped the gun. It clattered against the floorboards, discharging a single round that buried itself harmlessly in the rotting wood, inches from his own foot. He scrambled backward, crab-walking through the dirt, his hands held up to shield his eyes from the glare. Emily had fallen hard. She was sprawled in the mud, blinking rapidly, her face a mask of shock. The yellow raincoat she wore was torn and smeared with filth. She looked from the lights, to the gun, to me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Trey was the only one who didn't move. He sat slumped against the wall, his arms resting on his knees, his head bowed. He wasn't surprised. He was relieved. He knew the cavalry had arrived. I stood behind the false wall I had constructed at the rear of the cabin. I had moved from the shed during the storm, entering through a hidden rear panel while they were busy arguing over murder. I had sat there in the dark, holding my cup of tea, listening to them plan my son's execution. I had waited for the perfect moment, the moment of irrevocable intent. I pressed the button on the remote in my hand. A hydraulic hiss cut through the sound of the rain. The back wall of the cabin, which looked like solid rotting oak, began to slide open. It moved smoothly on silent rails, revealing the stage I had set. The criminals on the floor gasped. As the wall retracted, it revealed a clean, well-lit alcove. I was sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair, my legs crossed comfortably. I was wearing a fresh suit, dry and immaculate, contrasting sharply with their soaked, wretched appearance. In my hand, I held a porcelain cup of Earl Grey tea, but I was not alone. Flanking me, standing like statues in full tactical gear, were 6 members of the state police SWAT team. Their black uniforms absorbed the light. Their faces were hidden behind ballistic visors. The red laser sights of their automatic rifles cut through the dust-filled air, pinning Terrence and Emily to the floor. "Hello, Terrence," I said, taking a sip of tea. "You dropped something." Terrence stared at me. He looked at the laser dot dancing on his chest. He looked at the gun lying in the dirt. He began to shake violently. "Uncle Jeremiah," he stammered. "One. We were looking for you. We thought you were hurt." "Save it," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "The court is now in session." Emily pulled herself up to her knees. She tried to fix her hair, an instinctive gesture of vanity that looked grotesque in the circumstances. "Jeremiah," she said, her voice trembling but trying for that old manipulative sweetness. "Thank God you are safe. We were so worried. Trey told us you were dying. We came to save you." "To save me?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that why you brought a gun, Emily? Is that why you told Terrence to shoot my son? To save me?" She froze. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie, looking for anything to hold on to. I never said that," she whispered. I pointed to the ceiling. "Do you see that red light, Emily?" I asked. She looked up. Next to the blinding floodlights was a small black camera with a blinking red tally light. "That is a 4K resolution camera with a high-gain directional microphone," I explained. "And it is not just recording to a hard drive. It is connected to a dedicated fiber optic line I ran out here 3 years ago." I leaned forward, setting my teacup down on a small side table. "You are streaming live, Emily. Not to YouTube, not to Facebook. You are streaming directly to the monitors in the captain office at the state police headquarters, and to the district attorney's secure server, and just for insurance to the cloud account of my attorney Rachel Katz." Emily's face went the color of old ash. She looked at the camera, then back at me. "They heard everything," she choked out, "everything I confirmed. They heard you admit to the fraud. They heard you admit to the forgery. They heard Terrence admit to the gambling debts. And most importantly, they heard you order the execution of your husband to cover up a robbery. That is conspiracy to commit capital murder, Emily. In this state, that carries a mandatory life sentence." "No," she screamed. "No, you cannot do this. It is entrapment. You set us up." I stood up slowly, smoothing my jacket. "I did not put the gun in Terrence's hand," I said. "I did not tell you to pull the trigger. I simply turned on the lights. You did the rest. You revealed who you really are." Terrence began to sob. It was a pathetic sound. He curled into a ball in the dirt, rocking back and forth. "The Russos," he moaned. "The Russos are going to get me. I am dead. I am dead." "The Russos are the least of your problems, nephew," I said, "although I suspect they will be very interested to watch the trial. I imagine it is hard to collect a debt from a man in solitary confinement." I looked at the SWAT leader, a massive man named Commander Vance, no relation to the judge. "Commander, I believe these individuals have some property that belongs to me," I said, pointing to the hole in the floor. "And I believe they are currently trespassing on private land with the intent to commit a felony." Commander Vance stepped forward, his voice booming through the small cabin. "Terrence Cross, Emily Cross, put your hands on your heads and lie face down on the ground. Do it now." Emily did not move. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a madness that was finally breaking through the cracks in her sanity. "You ruined everything," she hissed, spittle flying from her lips. "You old devil. You were supposed to die. Why wouldn't you just die?" "Because I have work to do, Emily," I said coldly. "I have to clean up the mess you made of my family." She lunged. It was a desperate, futile act. She scrambled to her feet and charged at me. Her fingers curled into claws, screaming in primal rage. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to erase the man who had outsmarted her. She didn't make it 3 steps. 2 SWAT officers moved with a speed that blurred the eye. One swept her legs out from under her, while the other secured her arms. She hit the ground hard, face first into the sawdust and dirt she had been digging in just moments before. "Get off me," she shrieked, kicking and thrashing. "I am the victim here. He kidnapped us. He is crazy." "Cuff her," Vance ordered. The sound of the zip ties zipping shut was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. Emily Cross, the woman who thought she could outmaneuver a Supreme Court judge, was trussed up like a turkey in the mud of a hunting cabin. Terrence did not fight. He offered his hands willingly, weeping softly. He was broken. He knew it was over. "Officer, secure the weapon," Vance said, pointing to the gun on the floor. An officer bagged the pistol. I looked at Trey. He was still standing by the wall, watching his wife being dragged to her feet by the police. He looked numb. "Trey," I said softly. He looked at me. "It is over, son," I said. You are safe." Trey looked at Emily. She was staring back at him, her eyes wild, pleading now. "Trey, tell them," she begged. "Tell them you forced me. Tell them I was scared. Please, baby, I love you." Trey looked at her. He looked at the mud on her face, the madness in her eyes, and for the first time I saw the steel in his spine that I had always hoped was there. He walked over to her. He reached into his pocket. I thought he was going to comfort her. I thought he was going to weaken. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was wet from the rain, but still legible. He tucked it into the pocket of her yellow raincoat. "What is that?" she asked, confused. "Divorce papers," Trey said, his voice flat and dead. "And a printout of the texts between you and Terrence. My lawyer filed them an hour ago." Emily's jaw dropped. "You knew," she whispered. "I knew," Trey said. "Dad showed me. Goodbye, Emily." He turned his back on her and walked over to stand beside me. "Get them out of here, Commander," I said. The police dragged them out into the storm. Emily's screams faded into the thunder. Terrence's sobs were swallowed by the wind. The cabin was quiet again, save for the rain on the roof and the heavy breathing of my son. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Let us go home, Trey," I said. "We have a lot of cleaning up to do." But before we left, I turned back to the camera. I looked directly into the lens, knowing that the district attorney was watching, knowing that the state police captain was watching, and I knew one other person was watching. The Russo syndicate had eyes everywhere. They monitored police scanners. They monitored high-profile arrests. They would see this. I leaned into the camera. "The debt is canceled," I said. "He belongs to the state now." I turned off the lights. The cabin exploded into chaos the moment the back wall retracted. But the real violence was just beginning. Commander Vance screamed for compliance, his voice cutting through the thundering rain. But Terrence was beyond reason. He was a rat trapped in a cage of his own making, and he snapped. With the floodlights blinding him and the red laser dots dancing on his chest, Terrence did not surrender. He scrambled for the gun he had dropped. It was a suicidal move born of pure panic, and the terrifying knowledge that a prison cell was just a waiting room for the Russo hitmen. "Drop it!" Vance roared. Terrence's fingers closed around the grip of the pistol. He raised it blindly, screaming a sound of pure primal fear. He did not even aim. He just wanted to make the world stop. 2 shots rang out. They were loud, deafening in the confined space. Terrence spun backward as if kicked by a mule. A bloom of red exploded on his right shoulder, shattering the collarbone. He hit the floor hard, the gun flying from his hand and sliding across the room to rest against my shoe. He screamed, clutching his shoulder, his blood mixing with the mud and sawdust on the floorboards. Emily shrieked, covering her head with her hands, curling into a ball. "Don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. I am unarmed. I am a victim. Move, move, move." The SWAT team swarmed the room. Boots hit the floorboards like thunder. In seconds, Terrence was pinned, face down, a knee in his back, his good arm wrenched behind him. A medic was already moving in, cutting away his shirt to pack the wound. He was wailing, crying for his mother, crying for mercy. Emily was hauled to her feet by 2 officers. The moment she realized she was not dead, she turned on her lover with the speed of a striking cobra. "It was him," she screamed, spitting at Terrence's writhing form. "He forced me to come here. He kidnapped me. He threatened to kill Trey if I didn't help him. I had to do it. Officer, please. I am just a terrified housewife." I watched her from my chair. The performance was visceral. She was crying, shaking, playing the part of the traumatized hostage perfectly. If I hadn't just recorded her ordering my son execution, I might have even believed her. "Get them out of here," Vance ordered. "Wait," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of authority that stopped the room. The officers paused. I stood up and walked out of the alcove, stepping onto the dirty floor of the cabin. I walked past the hole where the safe was buried. I walked past the bloodstains. I stopped in front of Terrence. The medic had stabilized him. He was pale, sweating profusely, looking up at me with eyes full of agony and betrayal. "Why, Uncle?" he gasped. "Why did you do this? We are family." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold, clinical detachment. "That is where you are wrong, Terrence," I said. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a sealed envelope. It was old. The paper yellowed with age. I had kept it in my private safe for 30 years, waiting for a moment I hoped would never come. "We are not family," I said. I tore the envelope open. I pulled out a document and a faded photograph. I held the photo up so he could see it in the harsh light. It was a mugshot, a man with wild eyes and a cruel mouth. He looked exactly like Terrence. "This man was Silas Vane," I said. "He was a contract killer, a man without a soul. 30 years ago, he tried to bomb my car to stop me from testifying against the mob. He failed. He went to prison for life." Terrence stared at the photo. The resemblance was undeniable. "He died in solitary confinement 6 months after he was locked up," I continued. "But before he died, he wrote to me. He told me he had a son, a baby boy he had abandoned with a junkie girlfriend. He asked me the man he tried to kill to save the boy. He asked me to break the cycle." I dropped the photo on his chest. It fluttered down, landing on his blood-stained shirt. "I took you in, Terrence. I changed your name. I gave you my name. I raised you as a cross because I believed that nurture could overcome nature. I believed that if I gave you love, education, and opportunity, you would not become your father." Terrence was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the grime. "No," he whispered. "No, that is a lie. I am your nephew. My mother was your sister. My sister died when she was 6 years old," I said coldly. "I lied to you to protect you. I wanted you to believe you came from good stock. But tonight, you proved me wrong. You proved that blood always tells. You are not a cross, Terrence. You are a Vane. You are the son of a murderer, and tonight you tried to follow in his footsteps." I let the DNA test results fall from my hand. They drifted down, covering his face. "You lived on my charity for 30 years, I said, "and you tried to kill the only man who ever gave a damn about you. Enjoy prison, son. You were born for it." Terrence let out a howl, a sound of pure existential despair. He wasn't just arrested, he was erased. His identity, his pride, his claim to the dynasty, it was all gone. He was nobody. "Take him," I said. The officers dragged him out. He did not fight. He hung limp in their grip, a broken puppet. I turned to Emily. She was standing near the door, cuffed, her eyes wide with shock. She had heard everything. She realized now that there was no inheritance to fight for, no family legacy to steal. She had destroyed her life for a lie. But she was a survivor. I saw the gears turning in her head. She looked at Trey, who was standing silently in the corner. "Trey, baby," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Did you hear that? He lied to us. He lied to everyone. We are the victims here. You have to help me. I am your wife. We can fix this. I forgive you for everything. Just tell them I was scared. Tell them Terrence made me do it." She was reaching for him, straining against the cuffs. She was using the only weapon she had left, her hold over him. Trey walked toward her. He moved slowly, his face unreadable. I held my breath. This was the final test. She had abused him for years. She had conditioned him to serve her. Would he break? Would he fall back into the pattern? Trey stopped inches from her. He looked into her eyes. Emily smiled through her tears, a hopeful, manipulative smile. "I love you, Trey," she whispered. "We can start over." Trey reached into his jacket pocket. Emily's face lit up. She thought he was reaching for a key, or maybe a tissue to wipe her tears. Trey pulled out a thick envelope. It was fresh, crisp, white paper. He held it up. "Do you know what this is, Emily?" he asked, his voice calm, steady. She frowned, shaking her head slightly. "It is a divorce petition," Trey said. Emily's face fell. "Trey, and this?" he said, pulling out a second sheaf of papers stapled together. "This is a printout of every text message you sent to Terrence for the last 6 months. The photos, the jokes about me, the plans to kill my father." He slapped the papers against her chest. The officer holding her had to steady her as she recoiled. "You call me weak," Trey said, his voice rising, echoing in the small cabin. "You call me a placeholder. You slept with him in my bed." "Trey, please. It was just a fantasy," she pleaded, desperate now. "It meant nothing." "It meant everything," Trey roared. He stepped closer, invading her space. "I loved you, Emily. I would have given you anything. I stood against my father for you. I was ready to go to jail for you, and you were laughing at me. You were planning to kill me." He leaned in, his face inches from hers. "You said Terrence was twice the man I am. Well, look at him now. He is bleeding in the mud, and I am standing here. I am the one holding the cards." He shoved the papers into the pocket of her ruined raincoat. "You are fired, Emily," he said. "As my wife, as my partner, as a human being. You are fired." He turned to the officer holding her. "Get this trash out of my sight," he said. "No," Emily screamed. "Trey, you cannot do this. I know things. I will ruin you." "You cannot ruin what is already broken," Trey said without looking back. The officers hauled her out. She was kicking, screaming, cursing his name. She sounded like a demon being dragged back to hell. When the door slammed shut, the silence that rushed back into the cabin was heavy. Trey stood there, staring at the door. His shoulders were shaking. I walked over to him. I did not say anything. I just put my hand on his shoulder. He turned and buried his face in my chest. He cried. He cried for the wife he thought he had. He cried for the years he had wasted. I held him. I let him grieve. "It is okay, son," I whispered. "It is over. The cancer is cut out." After a few minutes he pulled away. He wiped his face. He looked older, harder, but he looked clean. "Did you mean it?" he asked, looking at me. About Terrence, about his father. Every word I said. So he really wasn't family. I looked at the hole in the floor where the safe sat, mockingly empty. "Family is not blood, Trey," I said. "Family is loyalty. Terrence was never family, and neither was she." I gestured to the door where Emily had been dragged out. "You are my family," I said. "You are the only family I have left, and that is enough." Trey nodded. He took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of rain and wet wood. "Let us go home, Dad," he said. We walked out of the cabin, leaving the lights blazing, leaving the fake safe in the hole, leaving the ruins of the conspiracy behind us. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and fresh. As we walked toward the police cars, I saw the flashing lights reflecting off the trees. It looked like a celebration. I had lost a nephew. I had lost a daughter-in-law. I had lost my privacy. But I had saved my life. And more importantly, I had saved my son. The cost was high. But as a judge, I knew the value of things. It was a bargain. The gavel struck the mahogany block with a sound that felt like the closing of a heavy book. It was over. The trial of the century, as the local papers called it, had lasted only 3 weeks. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. The video from the cabin, the audio from the house, the financial records, the DNA test. It all painted a picture so clear that the defense attorneys barely put up a fight. Terrence stood to receive his sentence. He looked nothing like the arrogant young man in the tuxedo who had raised a toast to my death. He was gaunt, his skin sallow, his arm still in a sling from the gunshot wound. When the judge pronounced the sentence, 25 years in a maximum security state penitentiary without the possibility of parole for 20 years, Terrence did not cry. He did not scream. He just stared at the floor. I think in a twisted way he was relieved. Prison was a terrible place, but it was safer than the streets, where the Rousseau Syndicate was waiting for him. In prison he was just another inmate. Outside he was a walking debt that could only be paid in blood. He was led away in chains, the clang of the metal echoing the end of his ambitions. He would be 55 years old before he breathed free air again. A wasted life, born of bad blood and worse choices. Emily fared no better. She tried to play the victim until the very end, weeping and claiming she was coerced. But the jury had seen the video. They had heard her voice screaming, "Kill him." They had seen the cold calculation in her eyes as she dug for gold. The judge sentenced her to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted grand larceny, and fraud. As the bailiffs took her arms, she looked back at the gallery, searching for Trey. She was looking for one last lifeline, one last person to manipulate. But Trey was not there. He had chosen not to attend the sentencing. He was done watching her perform. I walked out of the courthouse a free man. The reporters were there shouting questions, flashing cameras, but I did not stop. I had said everything I needed to say in the witness box. I got into my car where Rachel Katz was waiting. She smiled at me. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. We had won. Justice had been served. But as I looked out the window at the city skyline, I knew that the legal victory was just the beginning. The real work, the work of rebuilding a life, was just starting. The next month was a flurry of activity, but of a different kind. I did not go back to the mansion. I could not. That house with its high ceilings and echoing halls was tainted. It was a monument to the lies I had lived with for so years. It was where my nephew plotted my murder and my daughter-in-law betrayed my son. I put it on the market the day after the verdict. It sold in a week to a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley who wanted a trophy home. I hope he finds more happiness there than I did. I sold the cars too, the Shelby, the Jaguar, all of them. They were beautiful machines, but they were just things, and things I had learned could be heavy. They could weigh you down. They could make you a target. I took the proceeds from the house, the cars, and the liquidated investments, and I did exactly what I told Emily I would do. I established the Jeremiah Cross Scholarship Fund. It was a blind trust dedicated to paying for law school for underprivileged students, young men and women who had the fire and the integrity to serve justice, but lacked the means. It was ironic. Terrence had wanted that money to pay off gambling debts and buy freedom he did not earn. Now that same money would build the next generation of judges and prosecutors who would put men like him behind bars. Every dollar he tried to steal was now a seed for justice. It was the ultimate revenge. 6 months later, the air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. I sat on a small aluminum boat in the middle of a quiet lake. It was early morning, and the mist was still rising off the water, swirling like ghosts before vanishing in the sunlight. I held a fishing rod in my hand, feeling the gentle tug of the current. Across from me sat Trey. He looked different. The shadows under his eyes were gone. He had gained a little weight, healthy weight. He was wearing a flannel shirt and a baseball cap, looking less like a corporate husband and more like the man he was meant to be. He was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. The silence of two men who no longer had secrets. He had moved to a small town 2 hours away. He had started a small business restoring antique furniture, a passion he had abandoned years ago because Emily said it was not prestigious enough. He was working with his hands. He was making his own money. He was happy. "I missed this," Trey said, watching his line. "Me too, son," I replied. We did not talk about the trial. We did not talk about Emily or Terrence. We talked about the fish. We talked about the weather. We talked about the future. It was a simple life. I had rented a small cottage near the lake. No servants, no security systems, no hidden cameras, just a roof, a bed, and a view of the water. I had kept enough money to live comfortably, but not enough to be a king. I did not want to be a king anymore. I just wanted to be a father. I looked at Trey, and I saw the healing. It would take time. The scars from Emily's betrayal ran deep, but he was standing on his own 2 feet. He was no longer a placeholder. He was my son. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly rich. I reeled in my line, checking the bait. The sun was fully up now, painting the lake in shades of gold and fire. It was beautiful. It was real. It was something money could not buy, and poison could not kill. I turned to look at you, the viewer. Yes, you watching this screen right now. I know why you are here. You came for the drama. You came for the betrayal, the twists, the satisfaction of seeing the bad guys get punished. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you a thrill. But I want you to take something else away from this. Something more important than the entertainment value of my tragedy. Look at your life. Look at the people around you. The people who smile at your jokes. The people who drink your wine. The people who claim to love you. Do they love you for who you are? Or do they love you for what you can give them? It is a hard question, a terrifying question, but you have to ask it. You have to look past the words and see the actions. You have to watch the eyes when you say no. You have to listen to the silence when you are in trouble. Greed is not a loud monster. It does not knock on the door and announce itself. It is a quiet poison. It slips into the room wearing a tuxedo and a smile. It calls you uncle. It calls you dad. It calls you honey. It waits for you to turn your back. It waits for you to get comfortable. And then it drops the pill in your glass. Do not let your guard down. Do not let success or money or comfort blind you to the reality of human nature. Love your family, but trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone demands more than they give, pay attention. I was a judge for 35 years. I thought I knew the law. But the most important lesson I learned did not come from a law book. It came from a dinner party. It taught me that justice is not something you wait for. It is something you make. It taught me that dignity is worth fighting for. And it taught me that the only people who deserve a seat at your table are the ones who would sit there even if the table was empty. So be careful, my friends. Be vigilant, and never, ever let greed blur your vision of the people who claim to love you. Because when you pick up the poison wine to drink, the person who falls down dead might just be you. This is Jeremiah Cross, signing off. Stay safe, stay sharp, and watch your glass.